hand signal. Oh, it's a good idea if I put my own speaker on to start with, wouldn't it? I require you to use your hand signal that when you wish to speak, and I then will cue you when it is your turn to speak, and then you'll turn your speaker on. You mean the speaker button? No, so you'll raise your hand if you wish to speak. I will write them in a list like we were doing in the hall, and when it's your turn to speak, I will turn my speaker off and you will turn yours on, okay? No, the queuing is not working, all right? Just the speaker is though, okay? So just make sure your speaker is off, otherwise it will pick up those kind of little side comments that we might make to each other that may not have been caught up or heard when we were in the hall. I require you to use your hand signal so when you wish to speak, and then I will cue you to turn your microphone on to speak when it's your turn. I remind you that the usual meeting etiquette and protocols apply, and I ask you to turn off your mobile phones or place them on silent before we begin. Yes, Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I'll press my button. So we're only going to be seeing variations to motion if we can see that far.
Correct.
So we're not getting it.
No, it won't. People who have not got a monitor in front of you are going to be relying on there. Now, please let us know if that text or the font size is not big enough. We did experimented with it today, and that's the size that he set it at. But let us know if you have a problem. All right. I think that's all, and we can actually begin. There are no apologies. Any conflicts of interest by elected members? Yes, Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'd like to raise a perceived conflict of interest with item 14.7 on the agenda tonight. It's taken me some time to determine this, but it was my family home for over 28 years. And my family did try to do this itself, and I don't think I could be objective enough because I have too much emotion attached. So I will remove myself from the chamber during this particular motion tonight because it used to be my home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cornish. There are no Sorry, Councillor Turnbull.
I have a perceived conflict of interest for 14.2. Apparently my name appears in it, but I wish to stay in the chamber and vote. That's one about confidential
items. Okay, thank you. There is no one requiring leave of absence. It's good to see two sickies back again tonight for the meeting, Sarah Hughes and Councillor Hughes and Councillor Hubel. Welcome back. Confirmation of minutes. I'm looking for someone to... Thank you, Councillor Dawes. You're moving. Anyone? Councillor Davis is seconding. All those in favour? Carried. Before we go to deputations, I'll just welcome Craig Rowe, who's over in the side area there, who is the person who you will have met on Zoom, who conducted our representational review. So I welcome him to the meeting tonight. Right, we have our first deputation, which is who is Alison Evenden from Burnside Retirement Services Incorporated. Alison, can you hear us at all? That's going to be managed by... Hello?
Hello?
Yep,
That's
lovely.
That's Lucille.
Hello, this is Lucille. Good evening.
Lucille is the manager of Burnside Retirement Services or Pineview Village. Are they both there, or is Alison there as well? I understood Alison was doing the deputation and Lucille was going to be there to just answer questions if there are questions related to the operation of the village.
Lucille, did you hear that?
Yes, it's not a very clear line. I can hear you clearly, but the other is it's really very loud and you can't really hear well.
Okay, Lucille.
But I can hear you clearly.
I will happily repeat any questions that come your way. Is Alison on the line, please?
I'm not with Alison, but she was definitely trying to get through because she was going to call it exactly 7 as well.
Okay. Just try and contact Alison. Lucille, Alison isn't on the line at the moment. We're just going to try and contact her because it hasn't come through on the Skype call.
Sure.
All right. There are no petitions. Public question time of temporarily suspended. Questions on notice, I haven't received any. Motions on notice, I am going to move those until after the reports of officers, and hopefully we will get to them tonight. I'm moving them because I think it's important. First of all, we do have a guest who's going to be here to answer questions if they are required of the representation review, and hopefully we will get through all of those reports reasonably swiftly and smoothly, and then we can return to the motions on notice straight afterwards. Oh yes, we can do 12. Are there any questions without notice? Motions without notice, I haven't received any information about them. Councillor Hubel, you did have something that you wanted to say in other business. We could skip and do that one now while we're waiting as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I wanted to acknowledge the teams for the Old Collegians Rugby Club who competed in a variety of grand finals over the last 2 weeks. They ended up winning their grand finals for their under-18 division, as well as their 3rd grade and 2nd grade. Unfortunately missed out on the Premier grade, but congratulations to that club. They've had some good success this season.
I'm jumping around a bit, but we might as well use the time. I'll go back to the Mayor's report. Would anyone like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Dawes. Seconded, Councillor Davis. All those in favour? It's the Mayor's report. Item 16. Yeah, I will, but I thought we might as well do the things that are not going to require any major formality. Reports of members, delegates, working parties. We've got Alison. Alison's on now? Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Alison.
Hello, Madam Mayor. I do apologise. I was unable to connect electronically, so I'm sorry for not being able to answer earlier.
That's okay. Now you have a 5 minute. You have 5 minutes to speak, Alison, with a warning bell at 4 minutes. And
okay.
Mr. Cooper will ring the bell, and if there's any doubt, let you know. And then if you would stay on the line, if anyone has any questions they wish to ask you after you have finished speaking. So your time starts now.
The audio is not great from your end, but that's fine. We'll see how we go.
Okay. If there's anything that needs repeating, when it comes to particularly our questions, Martin has offered to ask those questions or repeat those questions for you anyway. We can hear you very clearly. Okay.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name's Alison Evenden and I'm the current chair of BRSI. I thought it might be useful for Council to hear from me directly regarding the item on tonight's agenda regarding the review of our Constitution. As has been stated in the CEO's report contained in the agenda for the meeting, the Constitution underwent a wholesale review which was completed in 2015. This was one of a number of measures following my appointment in 2013 to strengthen and improve governance and accountability. After our AGM in 2018, the then CEO of Council suggested to us that we may wish to review the Constitution again with a view to removing elected members as board members, as it was the view of council management at the time that elected members not be appointed. So we engaged external advisors and undertook this review, which was presented to Council in May 2019. We're certainly very happy to work collaboratively with Council with regard to any suggested changes to the draft, but to now we've not had any feedback or communication with what Council may wish to amend. The main aspect from our perspective is the recommendation that elected members are not appointed to the board, which accords with our view that for a number of reasons it would be better if the board was totally independent of council. These include that there's an inherent conflict of interest for elected members when appointed to the board, as has been pointed out in the CEO's report, and that elected members, when appointed, would need to act independently of their role as a representative of council. And it was my experience with a couple of cases where elected members were on the board who found it difficult to separate these two roles, especially as to confidentiality of matters discussed at board levels. The other is that we are a small organisation and the board acts in a semi-management role due to the small number of staff. It's therefore our opinion that it's essential that the board consists of a skill set of members for undertaking that role, and it's more than just strategic direction of management and governance, as is often the case with larger boards or larger organisations. So collectively, members need to have skills in law, accounting, particularly finance, business management, retirement village services or governance, and the normal expected skills of business management, strategic thinking and good governance. Not all elected members have these requisite skills, and that can act to the detriment of the organisation. Since Madam Mayor's term as the final elected member on the board expired in April 19, we have operated with a board of 3 until our AGM last year, when we became 4. However, that most recently appointed member has since resigned due to work commitments, so we have been operating again as 3 members. In our view, the ideal number of members is probably at least 4, but no more than 7. And in our view, a board of 8 to 10 in an organisation as small as ours is not workable and would be too unwieldy and bureaucratic. It's also important to consider it from the resident perspective, as they have reported to me that they feel vulnerable if there are ever-changing members of the board or appointment of people who have shown no real interest in the village at all other than to attend board meetings and do not attend village functions. So for that reason, we suggested in this revised constitution that the board itself deals with the canvassing of new candidates and presents the relevant recommendations to council for approval, so that we could ensure a fit of the relevant required skills at the time and for the ability to work cohesively with other members. So it is our recommendation that the selection process would more effectively be undertaken by the board rather than the council, but I see that the report doesn't support this view. In our experience with council undertaking the process of selection, often there's been no consultation with the board as to what skills may be required at the time, or have any indication of candidates who show a true interest in the village. So it can lead to the appointment of people who may just appear passive in interview or have a good resume rather than the best fit for the right selected person.
Alison, that's the 5 minutes. Have you got anything much else that you wanted to add?
No, other than to suggest that there are no real changes to the Constitution other than the removal of the council elected members and obviously remuneration for those members. But we're happy to work with council with any further changes that may be required. and I've invited Lucille to attend to answer any questions and would be happy to also answer questions myself.
Thank you very much. Are there anyone around the table who wishes to ask a question? Councillor Piggott?
Thank you. My question is not, I mean, it's relevant not perhaps to the Constitution, but since we've got the benefit of Alison with us, my question is whether there's any scope, not within the current Constitution, is there any scope for actually broadening perhaps the services of BRSI beyond accommodation? Has that ever been considered, or it obviously would need to probably change, well, not obvious, I think it probably needs constitutional change, which is fairly narrow objects, but has that ever been considered at board level, that perhaps the services and influence of the organisation could be expanded from what it currently does?
I'm sorry, Councillor Piggott, that was such poor audio I could hardly get any of that question. Could someone repeat that to me?
Hi Alison, it's Martin. I'll do my best. So Councillor Piggott asked if there was any scope to expand the services of BRSI outside the provision of accommodation. Has there been any consideration of that, please?
Thank you for that question. We have undertaken a strategic plan, and I think that you have all been provided with a copy of the revised strategic plan. We introduced one soon after my appointment initially for 5 years, which has been reviewed last year, and the issue of whether additional services should be supplied or additional developments be undertaken has been considered by the board, but at this stage is not something that we feel should be mixed with the current independent living arrangements that we currently have there. Lucille, did you wish to add anything to that?
No, other than I currently do link the residents into community care packages through the council and other packages that may come from, say, for example, Southern Cross or ACH, depending on where the residents want to go. But I do those connections for them because residents, with the policies that changed, do have to stay at home longer. So our scope of management has gone further, where we have to deal with people having dementia and those kind of things, where they can still stay at home, but with the packages.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Right. Don't appear to be any further questions, so thank you very much, Alison and Lucille, for attending the meeting and providing us with a representation.
Thank you for the opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much.
Right, we will now move to, we haven't done 17. We're going to go back to reports of officers, and I will seek a withdrawal of each item. First of all, 14.1, the representation review. Is there anyone who wishes to withdraw that? Councillor Piggott. 6-month review of items. Failing there being anyone who wishes to withdraw, I seek... Sorry, Councillor Davey, you wish to withdraw it? Burnside Retirement Services, Councillor Lemon. Chief Executive's report, Councillor Davey. Finance end of the month report. Councillor Davey, are you moving or are you withdrawing? This is why we're moving motions of notice to the end. It's okay, don't worry. Policy review. Portion of Swift Avenue. No, I seek a mover then. Thank you, Councillor Piggott. You've got to just depart out the doors. I hope you walk fast. I seek a mover. Was Councillor Jones, I think. Did you have your hand up? Sorry. It was Councillor Piggott. All right. Moved Councillor Piggott, seconded Councillor Lemon. All those in favour? Carried. Councillor Lemon, you might be the... did he go that way? Could somebody just, oh, Wendy, if you wouldn't mind? Oh, he's back. He's just needs it let in. Thank you. We're just remembering all of the accesses and entrances. All right, so that one's done. Old Collegians Rugby Club, Councillor Jones or Councillor Hubel? You don't need to fight over it. Right, so we will go back to then the representation review. Councillor Piggott.
Well, I'd like to run the motion in accordance with the officer's recommendation. And speaking of that, the other thing, I guess, well, some comments around this are that the report is excellent. And I think it is. I have actually missed the workshops in regard to this, but getting it for the first time here, I think it covers the ground very well. I think it does cover the issues, not cover up the issues. It's a very different thing. Cover the issues that Burnside needs to address in regard to where we go on this, and I think it's a great document to actually inform anyone who wants to have an opinion on it and actually add feedback to the process. I did raise the question, not knowing of this document on our tables, that actually further makes it, I think, pretty clear cut for someone if they're willing to engage in it for not actually that long. The question of what we do does filter into a number of questions that follow on quite naturally, and I note in reviewing this document that has led people very much along those lines without leading them to a certain answer, which is the ideal survey. So I'd just like to commend the work that had been done, and I certainly feel it is appropriate to pass the officer's recommendation and put it out to consultation and see what the community thinks.
Before I see the second. I haven't got my microphone on. Thank you, Councillor Dawes. So anyway, you have just a mock of the survey form. It will be finalised and after tonight's meeting. So I seek a seconder to the motion. Councillor Davis, do you wish to speak? Is there anyone else? Councillor Davey?
I wish to move an amendment, please, in accordance with the Councillor Pickett's motion, but that Council recommends, and that Council recommends serious consideration of the current structure of 6 wards with 2 councillors per ward.
That's not an amendment, that's completely different, isn't it?
So that's just to say, and I endorse the comments that Councillor Piggott made, and that it has been a well-considered process development. However, I think I'm not convinced that a case has been made that we actually need to make a change. I don't know how many years that we've actually had 12 councillors and 1 mayor, but it's many, many years. This structure has served the City of Burnside and its residents very well, and so I think it's only reasonable that we provide some guidance for our community as to a preferred option. It is a little bit confusing with 5 options. I think it's going to be a very detailed consultation process and difficult to work through, but no doubt our community will do that. But I still support the fact that we should say up front that we support the current scenario, which has worked very well for us. I can't see that on
If I may, Madam Mayor, just a comment about this point in the consultation. At this point in the consultation, it's actually not appropriate that Council puts forward its recommended position. The design of the review options paper is to provide the community with options without us steering the jury. When we get that feedback, the next step is where Council actually says to the community, this particular or a particular option is our preferred option. At this stage, it's actually not appropriate for us to say this is our preferred option on a particular one that's in the paper.
So on that grounds, it can't be accepted.
well, I disagree. I mean, another point I wish to make is that we had a workshop, a very well designed and run workshop that was presented to us by Zoom, and the outcome of that was that we, the elected body, were going to be presented with a draft of the the report before it came to Council, and we didn't have any opportunity to have input into this report before we're now considering it, before we received it last Thursday. So I'm not really happy with that, and so I didn't have an opportunity to stress and emphasise what my feelings were. So I think it's entirely reasonable that I'm happy to move it. Someone mightn't second it, but I think it's entirely reasonable, and I want to record it that I'm moving this way. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I can't see that on the. I'm a bit confused between what's up there.
If I can just provide a comment, Madam Mayor.
Or has it been blocked that I'm not able to?
Can I just provide a comment? I absolutely agree, Councillor Davey, and that is why there's an option in here which is the status quo, because we understood from that evening how important that was to some elected members. So it certainly hasn't been lost, and it is absolutely one of the options that's going out to our community. The intention was always to come back, as is the requirements of the Act, with a series of options to go to our community. One of which is the one which we got loud and clear, that the current status is important and needs to be considered. So that's why it's in there. We certainly weren't trying to diminish that. Okay.
Well, I'm going to go to Councillor Hedge next. Were you attempting to second that motion? Do you understand where we're at this point in time?
Absolutely. I want to second right now. So I had a really opportunity to ask the question.
Right, we'll just hold that for a moment. Councillor Jones, I'm seeking it. Do we actually have this as an official motion or not? As an amendment. I'm believing that governance-wise it's not appropriate, and I'm also receiving a message from our person in charge of governance that cannot be accepted because we are indicating a preference to the community, which is not what we're supposed to be doing in this round 1 of consultation. We are supposed to be providing a number of options to the community, and then from those options we then get feedback, then we look at what the community is telling us, and then we make a determination at that point in time for a second consultation
Correct.
out to the community.
Correct.
And at that point in time, people will have plenty of opportunity to comment on when the first consultation comes back as a report. Am I correct in what I've just stated?
Correct.
So we can't accept that as an amendment. So now I'll move to Councillor Hedge here, and if you can ask your question, and then I have Councillor Hubel next. I didn't have my microphone on.
Can I want that recorded and that it was rejected, please. I want it recorded in the minutes.
Okay, it can be recorded in the minutes. Be assured, Councillor Davey, this is not ignoring that option. This what we've been presented with tonight includes that option, but we are not supposed to be showing any preference when it goes out to our community. It is just one of the options.
I hear all of that, but I am very unhappy that we were not presented with a draft that we were able to make comment on, as we were promised. And my comments stand.
I don't believe we were promised.
Well, I've got to make a comment, Madam Mayor. I don't believe you were promised that.
I don't believe so either. Okay, Councillor Henschke, you have a question, then it's Councillor Hubert.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much. And thank you for the mock-up. My question is, in the section on background, is it possible to give the general public some more context in terms of history of this? I mean, it says that every 8 years council must consider its composition and ward structure, etc. And I just wondered if it might be helpful that residents and ratepayers know that, 8 years ago it was like this, and 8 years before it was like this, and we haven't really changed much. And here we are again today, and this is a new environment we're in, or whatever it is that's causing, might help them think about the ward structures differently. Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, I'm happy to insert a few more words for context.
No, I will speak. I agree with Councillor Davey. I think that this presenting the status quo, which we have had for many, many, many years, as just one of 5 options is wrong. I think we should be saying we can keep the status quo or we can change it. And if you think we should change it, here are some suggestions of how we might want to change it. Whereas this is very much leading people down to what we do at the moment, despite the fact we've had it for 100 years, is we can just throw out with the bathwater. I think that's wrong. I think tried and tested ways are best. 6 times 2 plus 1 has worked brilliantly for the council, and I really would be very reluctant to just do away with it.
I don't think anyone's actually doing away with it, but I am going to, at this point, before I ask Councillor Lemon to speak, seek a comment from our representational review report writer, so we get some guidance from him, please, Craig.
Thank you, Your Worship. The legislation's been clear, and this particular piece of legislation's been in South Australia since 1989. The process has been very much the same over that period of time. It's relatively clear. The representation options paper is a document that purely presents information to the community for them to understand the process, the issues, and for them to give feedback to the council. It's not supposed to take them in any direction or lead them in any direction that they can make a conclusion from. The second part that we do, the second stage of consultation, is, as has been advised tonight, is what's called, the report is that goes to the community, is council's position. And what we do in that document is we summarise all of the information that's been come back to council in terms of submissions and council's position or council's response to all of the issues raised by the community. So the community, firstly, in that second report, gets an understanding of what was actually presented to council and what council's response to all of those issues is. And then secondly, council presents its preferred option. And if that preferred option happens to be the status quo, well, then that's what's presented to the community with arguments justifying that position. But certainly the first report should not contain, in our opinion, any indication from council as to what their preference is at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. I hope that clarifies for everybody. Now, Councillor Lemon.
If I may start with a question. How long have we had 6 wards and 12 councillors? Do you know? I don't remember reading it.
If I can, so Madam Mayor, if I can just refer Council to page 45 of the agenda.
Oh, I hate it when you do that.
And I must admit, I didn't know it was there till I just looked then.
Well, I read this very thoroughly.
The comment says, the council area has been divided into 6 wards for many years, and the existing ward structure was introduced at the local government periodic election of November 2014.
Ah, yes. So that doesn't actually answer my question, because that was the last representation review we did. So given that we don't have this information here,
yes, sorry.
would you please take it on notice, because I think there are some very interested people around this room, and potentially also our residents should actually know how long we have had 6 wards, 12 councillors and an elected mayor. I just think that that's part of history that we should know, in fact.
Yeah, so through Madam Mayor, I'm happy to undertake that once we have that time frame, we'll update all the references to the report.
It's no rush, but we really, I think, need to know it.
Yep.
Before
Absolutely.
we come to our next decision. Thank you. And I'll speak to it now. I echo Councillor Piggott's sentiments earlier on about the report, but I really want to make one point. What the report does is the only thing that the report can do, and that is it actually, the stats that it uses is that of people on the electoral roll, and only people on the electoral roll. I did a spate of door knocking in my area last month. There are a lot of people in my area, massive amounts, that I know are not on the electoral roll. And there are a lot of people in Burnside who live here that are foreign nationals. They are not on, if you're not an Australian citizen, but you're a permanent resident, you're not on the electoral roll. We have many of these sorts of people living in Burnside. There are a lot of young people nowadays, when they turn 18, who are that disenchanted with our political system, they don't actually put themselves, even though they're citizens, they don't put themselves on the electoral roll. So using the electoral roll is the only thing we can do at this stage, and I think it is not good enough, because it doesn't. What disturbed me when I read this was that the amount of people in my ward had gone down. Now, I know that that's not the case, because we've just had a whole heap of houses sold in Glenside that have had people move into them, and we've got, I just think that my area has more infill than anywhere else, quite frankly. So it's because it's the electoral roll that's being looked at, and you're having non-citizens, permanent residents, whatever, and people coming and going through rentals, because there's a lot of cream brick flats in my area as well. So we don't actually have a really good idea of how many people live in any given ward, in any given suburb. And I've actually mentioned to our CEO earlier on, if we did want that sort of information, we can go to the ABS and ask them. The last census was in 2016, the next one will be in 2021. That doesn't mean we have to wait till 2021. They're collecting statistics all the time. And if you want to go to the ABS, like we go to other people that have expertise, like lawyers and like, engineers, you can go to them and you can say, we want an up-to-date snapshot of the amount of people that live in this area, and can you please tell us how many are permanent residents and how many are non-citizens? And they will come back to us at a price, and it's not an expensive one, with that information. And I actually think that it is in our best interests to get it. So that's moved away from the representations paper, but this paper assumes that the only people that are interested in this are people on the electoral roll, and I don't believe that's the case.
Good comment, but we only also get 30% of people who bother to vote when it comes to elections for a local government in here. And I was reading in Perth, the Lord Mayor of who was elected in Perth only received there was only 24% of people who voted for the mayor, for the Lord Mayor of Perth, which is minuscule. Maybe we should be looking for compulsory voting, and we won't get more numbers when it came to elections and representational review comments. Councillor, I think, Councillor Dawes, you had your hand up, but I think it might have only been to tell me to turn my microphone on, or did you wish to speak?
No, because you're doing better now.
Thank you,
yeah.
doing better.
I have a couple of questions for Mr Rowe. Back to him, but...
no, ask them through me,
yeah,
and
okay.
then I'll defer.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so through you, Mayor, at our workshop we looked at a number of options, and there were already 5, but one of those we did talk about was one that Norwood were using. I think Mitcham does it as well, but there was like 4 wards of 2 councillors as one with 3. And I notice it's not one of the options, so my first question through the Mayor is just to indicate, I know that there's a reference to 6.2.4 on page 38 as to the reasons why it's not really accepted as a good option, but I just wanted to hear from Mr Rowe if I could.
Actually, Madam Mayor, it's actually pretty better that you hear this answer from me, because Mr Rowe certainly presented to us a number of options with unequal numbers of elected members in each ward, and based on what I felt was very strong feedback from the council about not wanting unequal numbers of elected members in the wards, we are recommending that that's not an option that we go to the community with.
Because?
Because the strong feedback that I got from the workshop, where the elected members, to my mind, were saying that they weren't in favour of unequal numbers of elected members in wards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've answered my question. Yeah. The second question I have, and it might be me not quite getting it right, but in option 4, is that just a matter of the current wards being combined into 6 wards down to 3? Is that what's happened there? To me, it looks a very simple thing, but is that basically what they're saying?
So when that was put together, they've had regard for the percentage variance of electors in each ward. So it's not as simple to say it was the 6 brought down to 3. Really, it was looking at the city as a whole and understanding where the boundaries needed to be drawn to achieve the smallest percentage variance we could between all 3.
Okay. Okay, well, when I look at the map, and I can't remember what page it is on, but it's quite obvious to me that we've combined with Kingston Gardens and McGill and so forth, but is that not the case?
It could well be the case, but whilst it may appear that way, the thing that drove it was achieving the smallest variance of electors between each ward.
Well, my point is that option to the resident should be that we're combining 2 of the wards into 1 ward to get 3 wards and 9 councillors. Is that the one? Yeah. So that's on page 50. If anybody's looking at that, they'll say, okay, Ward 2, that's Grant and Henry and Jenny and I, that's Ward 2. Ward 1 is and so forth. But is that too simplistic for me to say that? Because it looks like that to me.
I'm not going to disagree with you. It looks like that because that's primarily what's happened.
Yeah, so therefore, in this paper, wouldn't it be easy to say, right, what this is we're combining 2 wards into 1 to get 3 wards represented by 3 councillors each?
Except that technically there may be some minor differences, might be, without matching the 2 maps specifically exactly together.
Yeah. I'm happy to get a comment through Madam Mayor from Craig on that one, if that's
thank you.
Pertinent.
The councillor is correct. That was one of the options we looked at in the 9 councillors, 3 wards. We did 2 or 3 options. The one that's presented is in fact an amalgamation of the existing wards. and we could certainly put a comment in the options paper to that effect under comments. But it does boil down to how the elector numbers are distributed, and that was a particularly strong and equitable balance. So that's one that we presented rather than several others that we developed.
All right, Councillor Dawes. Next person is Councillor Davey, followed by Councillor Carbone. You have a question, Councillor?
Thank you. Yes, I've got a couple of questions. One, how much again is this representation review process costing us?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's I think it's just under $30,000.
Thank you. The second question is, I was going to ask for some historical perspective put in. Thank Councillor Henschke for her question in that regard. And the other question that was raised about exactly how many years we have enjoyed our current system, and that's represented us, which I think is 50, 60, 70 years, something like that. So it'd be good to have that actual representation in here. My final question is, in terms of our consultation policy, this consultation is proposed to be held from November 2020 to 15th of January 2021. I was under the understanding that our community consultation was not undertaken during the holidays period, and this sits right in the middle of it.
Yeah. Can I answer two questions there? The first one, Martin's been so good as to do a bit of homework on how long we've had the 12 elected members, 6 ward structure. So the 2008-2009 representation review increased the numbers, 6 wards, 12 councillors, and that came into effect in the 2010 election. Before that, it was 5 wards and 2 councillors per ward.
2010, Councillor.
Yeah. Yeah.
It became 6.
Yeah. Well, so.
No, that's not right. That's not right.
I'm just. Right. We'll go and check our numbers. We'll go and check our numbers again. Sorry, I was quite proud that we had that. I was quite happy we had that answer. But and the second one, I'll answer a bit of it and then defer it. The consultation that's required under this consultation is 6 weeks, and due to that period straddling Christmas, which is not ideal, I agree with that. We've actually extended the period to 8 weeks to try and negate that. But I'm happy to get some advice from Karishma about the reason we've had to go with this timing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Chris. Through the chair, the reason for the timing, of course, as Chris mentioned, is not ideal, but we wanted to capitalise on our Focus magazine distribution, which happens end of November. We do want to encourage participation from the ratepayers, and from past consultations, we've noted that an extra flyer in the Focus magazine gets the best outcome. So we wanted to time it along with that distribution, and of course that saves extra budget as well, because we don't need to do a separate engagement flyer posted out.
Right, Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. I'm sympathetic to Councillor Davey because I do think the current system works, but then again, we can't have a bias survey, because you can have a bias survey. What's the point of doing the survey to begin with? And so I just have a couple of suggestions, if I can, moving forward. Not motions, but just a couple of suggestions. And that is making it clearer on anything we do on the current system. So, for example, if I have a look at this, it's got option 1, option 2, option 3, and so forth. I would have option 1 being the current system. Because I think normally when you've always got a status quo, and that's usually the first option, rather than buried in the middle. I'd also change the wording from 6 wards, 12 councillors to maybe current system. Okay? I would definitely have a bit of history. So this is the current system, and it's worked since, and I suspect it's probably since the 80s. Because I have a suspicion, and this is based on a few years of, history and so forth, that most people don't know how many wards there are. They don't even know what ward they're in, until they have a problem and they go on the website and realise, oh, okay, that's my ward and they're my 2 people. So people looking at this, they might be confused as to the ward system. So I would make it clearer, option 1, current system, and in the fine print, put down 12 wards and so forth. And I definitely have the history. Another thing I would have is ratios, because people, I think, tend to be pretty cynical about these sort of things. We don't work very hard, we get overpaid, all that kind of stuff. And I can see a lot of people going for option 5. Oh, less councillors, less rates. People tend to think that way sometimes. But then when they see the ratio, that they realise, well, actually, hang on, my voice is being diluted a little bit, then it might sort of put things on a bit more of a clearer perspective. So they're my thoughts on moving forward. We can't be a bias survey, but I think we should make it clearer on the status quo, because people tend to think, well, it works. I haven't had any complaints in the past. When I phone my elected member, they've returned my phone call and so forth. I've been pretty good. I think I'll stick with the status quo.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, I'd like to ask a question on, I suppose, other representation reviews and the options going out previously, whether or not 5 options have been a standard across the board. This council hasn't had a great history when we've gone out with 5 options. We tend to get across the board 20% result. And I just wanted to know, representation reviews are clearly a little bit more different. And what's the history with the results for going out with 5 options for that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll seek some comment from Craig.
Thank you for the question. In respect to the number of options, it's really a decision that's made by the individual councils. We've generally adopted a principle that we present at least 4 options to the community. One was generally always the status quo, and one's always no wards, because the legislation tells us that's the case. The legislation also says that the representation options paper has to be comprehensive and must contain and present all options to the community. Yep. So even if the council was looking at particular options for an 8 councillor structure, whilst it might not be something that the elected members believe in and will support, we would suggest that there at least be current 11, 10, 9 and perhaps 8 would be a good mix. Only as examples, and they are only examples, and I stress this, only examples of how the council area can be divided, that it doesn't commit council as a body to any of those. So generally we would go 4 at least.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm kind of happy with that response. Additional questions, I suppose, in relation to this. Obviously, there's the slight margin between the electors in wards, that the variance between wards that you can have. And in listening to Councillor Lemon's comments, which I think are actually quite valid with the actual the demographics of a particular ward versus the actual electors of a different ward, and whether or not there can be some sort of balancing act with that ratio where a ward such as Glenunga, which might have a lot of transient not voting people, they still call on your elected member because their garbage bin still doesn't get, picked up. They've still got footpaths that need to be fixed. So, the workload is a lot higher, even though there might not be as many electors. So whether or not that can be taken in when the final sort of breakup of the wards is sort of taken. My other concern, I suppose, with the consultation, and it's just the clarity. Once again, it's about the context of how it's presented. We are asking that feedback, whether or not we can get some advice from a firm that might do these properly, so that it's like a preferential voting system where we know where the clear winner is of which of the options, so we don't get that deadlock of 20-20-20 where we're able to sort of like work out which one's the better sort of option. And I suppose the next comment comes from what Councillor Carbone was mentioning in terms of they might actually select option 5 because it's reducing the number of councillors, but that actually might have a detrimental effect on the budget line anyway, because the higher your ratio, the state government pays a councillor more. So we might actually go up into the secondary bracket that Onka Pringa or Charles Sturt is on, and then in terms of that, the mayor gets 4 times what the councillor gets, so the mayor's salary goes up as well. So there might actually be, it might actually cost them a lot more by going down the wards because it would bump us up into the next category. So they're just some things that I thought I'd share with the chamber.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to quickly say that, yes, this is a pretty big topic, lots of options, lots to talk about, and thank you for the mock-up. And I wish to move that the motion be put.
Councillor Hughes, I think you might be the only one who can actually second that. Oh no, Councillor, yes, you haven't spoken, Councillor Turnbull. Could I ask a question before we do that? No.
No, it fails. There's no second.
No seconder, so.
Shouldn't fish.
Okay.
You shouldn't fish for a second.
Well, I wasn't. I was answering Councillor Davey.
You were fishing for it.
I wasn't sure if there was anyone legitimately able to. I was just investigating that, Councillor Davey. Okay.
In the interim, could I ask a question, please, about...
Wait a minute. With that motion lapses for failure of a seconder. I don't have anyone else here on this list, so therefore you can ask another question, and then it will be Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. My question relates to option 3, which is on page 47. This is the only one of the costings that has financial savings written into it, and I'm not sure why that is the case and why that one should have costings included in it, which the other ones don't, which might lead to some sort of bias potentially. Is there a rationale for that, and does that really need to be there?
Through Madam Mayor, just a comment from Craig.
Members, it was put there because it was the first option that actually offered up a reduction. We could certainly remove it, or we could put a similar comment on all of the following options that related to a fewer number of members.
Is it possible to remove it, please?
Councillor Hughes.
I was just going to seek clarification from the CEO around a comment that Councillor Cornish raised about the potential of us moving into a different category if that representation percentage changes.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, Councillor Cornish. It's our place in our council category is based on our total number of our population number as a whole, not on the ward numbers.
Right. If I don't see any other hands up, so if that is the case, I'd like to go back to Councillor Piggott.
Could I ask a question before I sum up? Could I ask another question? I just wanted to clarify, we've just had an assortment of suggestions thrown in from around the grounds. I just wanted to clarify what does change if this motion gets up, which I will be talking for in a minute. What changes are going to happen? Or is there no changes going to happen?
Through Madam Mayor, thank you for that. It will help me clarify. So in my mind, we're going to put maybe another explanatory paragraph on the front to introduce the history with a bit more clarity. We are going to include the number of years that we've had the current structure as per Councillor Lemon's comments, once we've ascertained what that is. We are going to remove the reference to the financial savings on option 3. And we are going to clarify the commentary in option 4 around the 3 wards and the 9 councillors to clarify that it is an amalgam of 2 wards each. And from my recollection, that's the changes that I'd committed to. I'm sorry? Oh, sorry, Councillor. No. Then it's remiss of me. I am happy to move option 1 being the current status quo, as per your thoughts. It's very clear in the description, but happy to do that. Not like that. I'll do
can we
what I
move,
can without leaving
Councillor
jury.
Piggott, can you please now summarise?
Yes, look, I'm happy to summarise. I think that's not a bad result. I think one thing that hasn't been discussed here is that there is a possibility that there may be a law change that might ultimately, not this time, admittedly, require us to drop from 13 to 12. And for that reason, I think perhaps this, like no previous one recently anyway, perhaps there should be more of a focus on change than what would normally occur. There's no question we have an established system and it works. We're very comfortable with it. But, I think putting a paper out that shows the ups and downs of each of those options is absolutely the right way to go. So, I think I'm not unhappy with the changes that Civic have just confirmed. However, I wouldn't have been unhappy if there were none also. So I think we should pass the motion if we could. Thanks.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm not sure if I can move this because I haven't had a chance to check whether I have any conflict in relation to any of the items on the that possibly be discussed. I don't.
I'm just going to make a comment, and Karishma will back me up on this. When the officers have gone through these, if we've become aware that an elected member would have a conflict, we would have advised that elected member.
Thank you.
And so we've actually done that due diligence for you.
Thank you very much
Excellent,
for that. Thank you. Suitably reassured, I'm happy to move that the officers recommended.
Seconded by Councillor Cornish. Does anyone wish to speak? Right, then I'll go back to Councillor Davey. Do you wish to speak again? All right, those in favour? Carried. Councillor Lemon? Thank you. 14.3.
Thank you. Now, this is going to be tricky because I can't see the end of the room. Rob, you've got an amendment for this, I understand? Sorry? The extra bit? So I'm proposing an amendment because this motion is silent. I might have to turn my back to see. Not over there, it doesn't. So can you, if you just put in a number 5? A number 5? Rob? No, I think I can request that independent board member appointments are for a 2-year period with a maximum term of 6 years consecutively. Now, hopefully that's 2 plus 2 plus 2. So, so instead of consecutively. Now, the reason I've actually put that in there is we discussed this when we had the workshop about the board terms, and there seemed to be agreement, and I will see in a moment, because this is the way the state government actually runs its boards. So you are appointed to a state government board and you have 2 years with a right of renewal for 2 years and a right of renewal for 2 years, and that is it. Then you will vacate that position and somebody else will take it. And I actually think that's quite reasonable for this particular organisation. I think anything shorter than that will not give a continuity. Anything longer than that embeds certain thinking. So 6, and it also means that with 2 plus 2 plus 2, you can actually have different skill sets coming in if those appointments are staggered over time. So I think that will meet our needs over the short term and the long term, given that we're about to appoint 2 board members and there's another 2 board members whose terms expire next year. So implementing this gives it, all right, we're going to have interviews for board members, possibly more regularly, but I think as the sole shareholder, we need to do that, and we need to actually look at the burden, and they can, in fact, go again and then again. So I hope that you support this. Everything else is fine by me, so I hope you support this amendment.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Hughes, you wish to speak? Councillor Davey, you wish to speak?
Could I just move an amendment? Because one of the things that confuses me a little bit, and I think just in line with what Councillor Lemon has said in terms of state government principles and how that all works, we talk of the Constitution and the rules interchangeably, and so I want to just move that we, instead of saying rules, call this the Constitution. Is there any difference before I move that?
I'm just referring to page 123, and they are referred to as the rules. So I agree with consistency, absolutely, but it looks like the legal reference point here is rules, as per page 123.
So why have we headed the agenda item review of Constitution?
It's a very good question. Okay. I'll apologise for the confusion that's caused. We probably should have called that review of the rules.
Thank you. Thank you. I thank everyone for all the work they've done, and it's a very important BRSI is a very important service, and for our community. I just think it would sound so much nicer. Rules sound like a backgammon game rules or chess club rules or something, whereas this is a very important retirement service, and I just think I'd like to see it called the Constitution and addressed as so. But if people disagree, so be it.
It didn't proceed, given the clarity, to my mind.
Yeah, question if I could. They're seeking our approval of changes they'd like to make. We've now introduced another one that may get live tonight. How does that work? Do they have to do that, or do they consider that? And do they have to do that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I've given consideration to that because in the past there was a practice where we would go back to them and ask them to provide us with a revised copy based on our requested changes. I'm actually changing that process. So once Council has adopted a position this evening, we will get our lawyers to draft the new version of the rules, and they will come back to council for our adoption. There will be no step of us going back to the committee, getting their imprimatur. Council is in control of this entity, and that's the approach I'm recommending too.
Okay, as a follow-up question then, and it might be a timing thing, but we are about to recruit or appoint a person replace a person, an incumbent potentially. If the incumbent was to reapply, they would have done them 6 years, I would think. So under the new constitution would not be valid. How's that going to operate? Is that something that should happen first, after?
My understanding is the individual that may reapply, that application wouldn't be valid under either circumstance.
Oh, that wouldn't be valid under either circumstance?
No.
Oh, okay, so we don't have a practical issue there?
No.
Okay. Great. Okay. And perhaps the other thing, is it an appointment for 2 years, the one we're about to do?
I'd suggest that's the way it would proceed, yes.
Right. Okay.
May I ask a question? Does that mean that someone after 2 years, can't apply again then? Can they apply again when there's nominations again? Or once they've done 6 years, that's it, kaput, no more?
That's what we're proposing, Madam Mayor.
That's what's been proposed.
Is that, yeah, because it's similar to the current arrangement, where once you've done 9 years, you can't come back on. This is changing that to make it 6 years. So consecutive, yeah.
Since I've still got the microphone, I would read that the other way. I would read the word consecutively, I think, means I can do 6. I've got to take 2 off, but then I can do another 6.
That is actually the...
What is the intent?
That is actually the way that it has operated in the past, because I was on the board for 9 years.
But we didn't have that rule then, presumably?
No, we didn't have that.
No. Could I propose an amendment?
Yes.
Yep. I'd like to propose removal of the word consecutively under 5, if that is valid. But I'd also like to pick up Councillor Davies' point, and I think it is and so if I could make perhaps number 6, that contrary, unless contrary to legal opinion, that the name of the ruling document of BRSI be named Constitution.
Rules is the right.
Can I call it Constitution though?
In the Act, it's all rules. So it says the word Constitution once in the Associations and Corporations Act once. There are 98 references to rules. So the entire Associations and Corporations Act refers to rules. So I think you should call them rules.
Don't know if I should take legal advice I'm not paying for, but I will on this. I'll speak to this. I think I think we should take the word lose 6. That's fine. If I can. So I still would like to lose the word consecutively, and perhaps that's a variation. I just think it does leave it open. The 6 years, maximum term, not terms, of 6 years says to me 6 years, game over, and I think that's the intent. If it's not, I would like to hear it from the proposer.
The unfortunate about that is, can you just make it bigger again so I can read it again? Is this 2 + 2 + 2? Maybe that's what we should be putting in.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, you could, with a maximum of 3 2-year terms, or
2 + 2 + 2, because what that actually, I should wait until I sum up, but that is that they can just be rolled after 2 years if they're performing well. We can choose to just not go through that process.
Okay.
But, no, it doesn't say that, but it's implicit.
They have to be re-advertised every 2 years. You can't just roll them over.
Yes, you can.
We need to get some legal advice on that.
Well, I'm not the expert, but happy to
We have always people have reapplied after their term.
The rules can state how you want to manage that process.
Yes.
So, to my mind, that step could be incorporated in the rules if that was the wish of council. It's certainly not the way we've operated in the past. But just bear with me a second, Madam Mayor. I'm just reading some advice from Kelly Jones. The existing sub-rule 20.3 provides that if a board member retires or is due to retire from the office, the council will advertise determining a selection procedure for purposes recognised council after consultation with the board. It is proposed to amend this process to reflect that before appointing another person to the board will determine the selection procedure for the purpose of making a recommendation to council for appointment. The amendment would vest in the board the function of determining the selection procedure before it makes a recommendation to council for appointment. We do not recommend this course be adopted. The existing clause ensures an independent process for the appointment of board members in the consultation with the board. I guess the question to give clarity to this one is, at the end of the 2 years, how would you determine whether you're happy for them to be rolled over?
It would come to council.
Okay. I'll have to seek advice on this, Madam Mayor.
I don't think we can make that decision. I'm just going to express a concern is that as a board an ex-board member, who decides whether a person is suitable to continue as a board member? Surely they ought to go through the same process of application after 2 years, which has been the practice. I'm not saying because it's been done in the past, but it would seem to me that that would be the right way to do it, that you reapplied rather than just automatically be able to be rolled over for another 2 years.
Could I think this conversation about how they're reappointed is actually theoretical, because I don't think the motion in 5 talks about that at all. What it talks about is that they can do up to 6, which would be 3 lots of 2. How they're reappointed would be how they've always been reappointed. I don't think we've changed that. It might have been the intention, but that's not the case. My question is, I did take the word consecutively out. Is that a valid amendment or not?
Removal of consecutive is a valid amendment.
I'd say if you've got the consent of the mover, it's not an amendment, it's a clarification.
And if I don't?
if you don't, it's an amendment.
Right.
I'll answer that with a question. Well, if I may ask a question, does that then presuppose that after 6 years, those 6 years can take place 2 years in 1992, 2 years in 2002 and 2 years in 2022, and then after that they're done?
Yes.
That, well, I suppose that could be okay, given that we are the ones that appoint them.
Yep.
That there is a potential for confusion.
Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Piggott?
Will that be the case? I'll speak to the motion. Yep. I'll speak in favour of it. I think that is I think certainly the report in terms of the rules that were suggested changed, the one we accepted and the ones we didn't. I think we've got that right. I would absolutely agree with that. And I do also believe that the number 5, which was introduced by Councillor Lemon, is the right way to go as well. I don't think it talks about how they're reappointed. I think that's still the way it always has been. If that needs to change, that's got to change another night. But basically saying that 3 terms, I think it's interesting that that Alison spoke tonight about the fact that we recruit people without reference to them. In actual fact, we put 3 people on there, I think, in 2013, and all 3 of them have been there until last year, I think, have been reappointed. So I don't think that's a valid charge. I also think it is worthwhile to have a bit of turnover of talent. So I think 6 years gets the best out of people, and then you can get another set of people that perhaps you get their best 6 years as well. So I think as a policy, it is a good idea. I hope they don't bring it on council, because I'm up to year 10, so I'm in all sorts of trouble. But I do think it is right, so I will support this motion.
Sorry, Councillor Jones, you wish to speak?
Thank you. As I mentioned in the workshop, I'm against this motion. I'm totally against removing elected members from the board. We have elected members on the board of Eastern Health Authority. We have elected members on the board of East Waste. We have elected members on the board of Era Water. In fact, we actually changed it from having an expert to having Councillor Hughes on the board and Councillor Piggott on the audit committee. Because to me, having a councillor on the board gives me comfort in the way that having people, non-elected people, does not, because I kind of think they're watching out for the council. And I've been on council for 2 years. This is the first time I've ever seen any numbers from Pineview. And that's only because they wanted something from us. So I think that's pretty poor. This is not a body without risk. I mean, you look at their balance sheet. Residents' licence fees, $24 million. This could go horribly wrong, and we might not know about it. And the only reason we knew about it was because Anne and Helga have been on the board, and they were able to tell us about it in the workshop.
Councillor Lemon hasn't been on the board. I'm the only one.
Okay.
I was on it for 9 years.
Councillor Lemon, perhaps because she's from the ward, is an expert, but she was certainly able to tell us a lot about it. So it gives me comfort to have elected members on there. Alison made some comments, conflict of interest. I really don't buy it. I mean, I know people who were Eastwood and Glenunga Ward councillors. Di Wilkins was a councillor. She managed to be on the board. Jenny Malik was a councillor. She managed to be on the board. I spoke to her. She was astonished at the idea that we wouldn't have elected members on the board. The argument for a lack of expertise in the councillors, I mean, really? Is there anybody who would stand for election on the board of our elected members who you would think, oh no, they're rubbish? You know, they can't add value. We've got finance expertise, we've got legal expertise, we've got public health expertise, we've got government expertise. I just don't see it. So for that reason, I will be voting against the motion.
Councillor Davis?
I'd just like to clarify a point. There is a big difference between some of our entities. So I think the key point here is that on this board, you do not represent council, and you do not take, you act as an independent person, and it actually drives a whole bunch of conflicts potentially where council has a view and the board has a view. So that's a very, very different position than, say, EHAR or East Waste or Era Water. And so the point is that in, say, the hospital board and BRSI, whilst we, by virtue of history, have become, an important player in this, we appoint those positions, we actually have a conflict there. And you cannot do both of those roles. And it's essentially wrong to say that, that we should be keeping an eye on it in that way. That's not how we should be doing it. So I'd like to clarify that point. And I think that this is, I agree with the motion. I agree with what we're doing here, and I think it's right for where we cannot do both jobs and we cannot wear both hats, that you've been elected to this position, you've been endorsed by your population, and you're here to serve council and act in that capacity. You shouldn't leave the room every time we talk about BRSI or other potential boards where you do have a conflict, where you have a commercial obligation. So I support the motion.
I have to endorse everything that Councillor Davis has actually said. When you are a member of that board, you are not representing the council at all. You take the risk as a board member. If the organisation went under, you carry the burden of that potential risk yourself personally. You are not supported in any way by council in relation to that role. So Councillor Davis is absolutely right and very clear, and that has changed since ex-Councillor Malik was on the board, because things were different then in relation to conflict of interest. And certainly when I went on the board, I was advised I needed to take out my own public insurance against, in terms of risk should that board go under, because I carried equal responsibility along with the other members of the board. Thank you for that advice, Councillor Davis. Anyone else who wishes to speak?
Thank you, Worship. I will be supporting the motion, although I almost considered not to. Completely on the opposite spectrum of Councillor Jones, that I actually think these organisations should be a little bit more independent and should be choosing their board members themselves, pretty much like the hospital does, and just comes to us with this is our preferred candidate. However, I don't think that option will get up in this chamber, so I'll be voting for the motion as it stands.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Otherwise, I shall go back to Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I do hope you support this motion. This just gives us a time frame for board members. And I just want to wrap up by actually addressing Councillor Jones. Thank you very much for your point of view. It's always refreshing to have your point of view. And you're right, it could go horribly wrong. And you're right, we haven't heard about this until just recently. But that's not Pineview's fault. That's our fault. That's our fault for not having workshops 2 years ago when you were first elected, so you knew what this was and what our obligations as a council is, and how it's set up. So I actually think that we need to keep a bigger eye on this. We haven't for a while, and reading the Constitution rules, what are we going to call it? Well, today it's called the rules. After this motion gets up or not, it will be called the Constitution. I actually did notice that when it was originally set, I'm reading the background information, when it was originally set up, it was set up as a retirement village and a nursing home. Now, it isn't a nursing home, it's never been a nursing home, and I, for one, don't ever want to actually have council getting involved in nursing homes. So again, I actually think we need to look at this more closely. We might need to change that, because I would hate the board to come to us and say, well, we're going to instigate this nursing home bit now, thanks very much, we're going to have a nursing home, because that would be unfortunate. So you're right, we do need to keep a closer eye on this, and I think we can keep a closer eye on this through appointments of board members every 2 years to a maximum of 6. So I hope you support this.
Right, those in favour? Against? Carried. We move to Chief Executive Officer's report. Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Your Worship. I know we forget to keep clicking the microphone on. I know I do. I'm happy to move the first part of the officer's recommendation, and a second part of the motion, that each monthly CEO report include the report's outstanding list, capital R, outstanding, capital O, and list, in brackets for transparency. Thanks. This has always formed part of the CEO's report, and I think it's really important. I know certainly people in my community look at it and check it to see what's coming up on council, to see where their interest is, the area of their interest is progressing, and that's certainly the case with a group in Beulah Park who are interested in their traffic management issues. So I don't know the reason for it being not forming part of the agenda papers, but it is crucial that it does form part of the agenda papers for that very reason. For one, from my perspective, the ability to be able to keep track of where our council resolutions are at, and 2, for our community to know that as well. Thank you. The other thing is before we go on, I have a question. Would you rather someone second it and then I ask some questions? I have a question about, I thank you for the report. It's always very useful and brings us up to date with a lot of the issues going around or of importance to us. The one that I'm interested in that I'm not aware of, the reason for its delay, is the Coordinator of Environmental Assets, which has been vacant for quite a while. And I know there's quite a few issues in parks and park maintenance and plantings, looking after new plantings and things. And I just wondered where that position is at.
Madam Mayor, it's probably something I'd like to brief the council with in a confidential session, rather than speak openly at the moment.
Well, on that job, that position? Oh, right. Okay. And so are all the other positions continuing, or are they in
absolutely.
debate?
The only reason I say that is I don't want my staff to hear the answer to that question before I've spoken to the staff.
Okay, thank you. The other issue is I understand we're recruiting for a new manager of centres and events, which is a new position that I wasn't aware of until I saw it on the website. And I just wondered if that's a replacement for someone or it's a new position that we've created.
Through Madam Mayor, if I can just get some feedback from Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, that position is a team leader role, and it's actually been vacant for some time. We've had someone in there doing some acting duties for a while. So we're just firming that up. So it is an ongoing position.
Thank you. So is that different to... So I'm just a bit confused as to why that didn't appear in the list in the report. As we've got with Coordinator Environmental Assets, who I believe we have someone acting in that role, but we haven't filled it.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I misunderstood the question.
I just want... the Manager Community Centres and Events has been vacant for quite a while, and I'm just wondering why that didn't appear in the paragraph 17, the positions vacant, available, and their current status.
Fair question. Through Madam Mayor, Mr. Cooper.
Yes, through the Mayor. It's because we have an individual who's been acting in that position, so we wouldn't report that as a vacancy during that acting period.
Thank you. Thanks for the confusion. Now, and the only other issue that is rearing in my area is the area that I wanted to make a comment on is paragraph 36 on page 206, the portable pump track. I've got some residents who've just contacted me to ask why it's moving to Kensington Park Oval in December when they haven't been consulted about it. And my recollection is that when we did our original consultation and we had a whole lot of debate about certain sites that we nominated, Penfold Park, Kensington Gardens Reserve, Miller Reserve and another one, this wasn't included, but I think there was a council decision made that included Kensington Park, but the residents hadn't had any opportunity to have their say. They hadn't been consulted or involved in any way. So I just wondered how that's going to be managed.
Yes, certainly. Through Madam Mayor, I'll just seek a comment from Mr. Cant. He's just on his way.
And while we're waiting, I'm happy to compliment the administration on the Regal Theatre precinct and all the work that's been done to date, and the current master plan consultation is being viewed with interest.
Yep. And just while we're waiting, if I may, Madam Mayor, if I can just refer back to the the reports to council, they normally are on the agenda, and of course I'll commit to include them. It was just this time I was waiting for some updates that I didn't have at the compilation, but I agree, they should be on the agenda if we can achieve that.
Thank you.
Mr. Cant.
My apologies. Can you repeat the question, and then I'll be more than happy to respond.
Fair enough, fair enough. It's in relation to page 206, the portable pump track, para 36, which is currently in its third site. I've had some queries from some of my residents, our residents just recently, in Kensington Park who weren't aware that there was a proposal to move the pump track to Kensington Park Oval. And that flagged to me that we hadn't done any consultation or information, and they hadn't been involved in any way because of the way the original process was undertaken. I think we had 4 other sites that we chose and consulted on, and then a decision was made later on about Kensington Park. So I just wondered how we respond to that and what's in the pipeline.
Through your worship, you're absolutely correct. The 4 sites of the pump track trial were chosen by council and locked in by council resolution. Following the council resolution, the staff worked with the key stakeholders or the main users of each of those areas and also with the sporting groups to make sure that we could time each of those locations appropriately to manage as many conflicts as possible. So the consultation about the timing of that particular area was done with the school at the time, the main user of that reserve. With all of the other locations, we provide residential notification approximately 2 weeks before the pump track being set up on location, and that will include residential notification via letterbox drop as well as on-site notification.
So what do I tell my constituents? 2 weeks before. Sorry?
It's only going to be there for 6 weeks. Just the same as Newland?
They
just the same as Miller?
They haven't had any involvement.
Neither
in
did
any
Miller, neither
consultation.
did Newland. The residents didn't. It was only they through the sporting organisations, as Mr. Cant explained.
Well, yeah, my residents aren't happy with that, so perhaps that's something we'll need to talk about out of session. Or do I need to move a
There will
resolution?
always be residents who are unhappy, and there will always be, no matter where we put the pump track for whatever the reason. And it is there for 6 weeks. It was by council resolution. It was moved to 4 different locations. Penfold was slightly different because there was an objection from the community and a motion passed to say that it was not going to be there or at Kensington Gardens Reserve as a permanent fixture.
I remember that well, Your Worship, but my residents are saying they haven't had any involvement. They didn't know that the school had been consulted with, and I don't know that they'll be very happy to hear that. But I think we've got to manage this expectation.
Well, I think that so far, where they have been located, they've been managed extremely well.
Oh,
and
sure.
they have certainly been very popular. Even the one where it is currently Miller Reserve, I didn't think it was going to be quite as popular, but apparently we're getting 10,000 hits a week at that particular location as well, which isn't anywhere near as many as were at Newland, but certainly it is becoming increasingly popular as people know it's there. Mm. And it is moving on to another site, and that next site is Kensington Park.
And with respect, Mayor, the residents are concerned. They haven't had any information about the impact on them, the park, which is highly utilised, and how it will all mix in. So that's what I'm raising for the administration to deal with. And then one final issue that I have, question, before we move on, is back to the outstanding reports, number 4, which is page 2, the proposed community engagement plan for the Civic Centre site, which is that there's, following community consultation, a report be provided to council summarising the results from the engagement process and recommending next steps. This has to come back to council, not in an info doc, I thought. I thought that was the resolution of council. and that would therefore come back to council, not be provided out of session in an info doc. Is that not correct?
What I can say, through you, Madam Mayor, is that whilst the results of the consultation might be provided as an info doc, any decision that's required to be made obviously has to come back to a council to make decisions. So I'm sure that's the intent.
So why wouldn't that then come back to us for decision?
No, it will come back to you for decision. It's just that the first comment there is that the results of that will be provided as an info doc. And I can tell you now, no decisions will be made without a decision being made in this chamber.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Hubel, I think you had your hand up a long time ago. I'm assuming it was to second.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I also just had a couple of questions, all around the Tusmore Park wading pool. Look, read with some disappointment that we had no choice but to not open. No worries about that. I'm just wondering, do we have, are we in a position to jump on opening should restrictions relax? Are we in a position of being ready to open? Because I think it's being such a popular site and asset. I think it's the sort of thing, we see how people in Melbourne obviously are reacting as soon as restrictions do get relaxed, people really want to jump on it. And I'm just wondering whether moving into the hot summer months, school holidays, we'd be in a position to activate that site should we be able to.
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I'll hand it over to Mr. Kent.
Through your worship, yeah, absolutely, Councillor Hubel. If restrictions relax to the point where we're able to reopen it under normal conditions, it takes approximately 4 to 7 days to set up, including refilling and making sure the water quality is correct, but that would be a maximum.
And just one more thing also about the pool, specifically relates to your report, is through the Mayor, obviously, where there's talk of consultation beginning on some draft designs. Are we, as a chamber, able to get a bit of a sneak peek of those, or do we need to wait along with the general public? Or do we already have them?
We already have them via an info doc.
Oh, my apologies.
With images there, photographs.
I've been a bit out of action for a couple of weeks, so I apologise.
The photographs are really good, and the consultation will be very interesting as to what the community wants, so that's okay. Now, Councillor Davis, you are next.
So I want to clarify something with the skate park consultation. I guess I'm speaking to it, is that in terms of doing, we had this discussion for quite some time in terms of whether we're going to build a permanent one or not. But in terms of choosing the locations for the trial, we didn't actually there was no consultation done by council on any location, including Penfold Park, Kensington Gardens Reserve, or any other location about conducting a trial in that location. So there's no consultation for anybody. But my understanding is that 2 weeks prior to the skate park being moved there, that a document will be circulated notifying residents that that's about to come. So, yeah. So there was, so in terms of, I guess, if anyone's to blame for not doing a consultation of that process, it's elected members, not the administration. Yeah.
Thank you for that extra clarification. Now, Councillor Piggott, you are next.
Oh, yeah. Look, this is a fairly innocuous motion, but I'm not going to vote for it. I really would ask Councillor Davey to at least have the courtesy, actually, of asking the CO why the report wasn't in the agenda papers. I think it's the first time it hasn't been, and it appears to be a one-off exercise that he's willing to do without a motion of council, and I don't think that is the purpose of motions of council. So for that reason, I'm not voting for it.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Cornish.
I don't want to harp on the skate, the pump track, but to give Councillor Davies some residents some assurance, I'm absolutely certain a lot of informing the public has occurred. It was in the Messenger, it was in Focus. Like we planned out where every single one was going to go. It's been out in the community for over a year, the full locations, and I've just gone through our Facebook page for City of Burnside. There's at least 30 posts about the pump track and where it's going next. So they've certainly been well informed, so that it's coming.
Anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Davey, you wish to sum up? Councillor Hubel seconded, or did you not? Apologies. I thought when you put your hand up, that's what you were doing. And then you asked questions rather than...
I did ask questions,
yeah. You don't have to vote for it just because you second it. Right. You've seconded it. Okay. You don't have to vote with it, even if you seconded. The rules allow you the flexibility, just like a division. Right, Councillor Davey, you didn't wish to speak again, so I will put it to the vote. Those in favour? Yeah, one. Hang on, wait a minute. Hands keep on going up and down. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. Counts against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4. Somebody hasn't voted. Okay, 6. All right, so that means I have the casting vote. I'm not going to support the motion. I think it's unnecessary. I actually agree with Councillor Piggott. Unnecessary if the report wasn't there, and that's really the essence of what's in this motion. So I'm not going to support it. So. Therefore, Councillor Davis is going to move the officer's recommendation, and seconded by Councillor Hughes.
And I move that the motion be put.
Right. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? I don't think there's... yes, Councillor Turnbull, you haven't spoken, so, and neither have you...
I've just moved that the motion be put. I've just moved that the motion be put.
Right.
No, we weren't going to move it.
Guidance? If I'm going to ignore that the motion be put, then I need to ignore that.
No, so Madam Mayor, you've got to deal with the motion.
Correct, yes. Do we have a seconder for the motion be put? Councillor Carbone, thank you. Right, those in favour? Right, then I will put the motion. That was carried, so I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to move in accordance with the recommendation. And I just had a couple of queries about at paragraph 22 on page 211, where we have, and it's a very comprehensive report, and I'm grateful for that. We have 11 ratepayers who entered individual payment arrangements, and 24 have applied for payment postponement. Are these single or multiple premises? They're just individuals.
If I can refer that to Mr. Cooper, or
through the chair, I believe most of them are single premises, and there are some senior postponements in there as well.
Thank you. So that means they're not one person doesn't have multiple premises. Okay. Thanks very much.
Seconded by Councillor Henschke. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Cornish.
I love the new look.
Right, and if failing there to be anyone else who wishes to speak, go back to Councillor Davey. Right, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Can I just add that those two last motions have taken a huge amount of time, and they could have been resolved through questions being asked prior to the council meeting. I am concerned that there's been a lot of time that has, I'm not saying it's wasted, but it could have been avoided, and that's one of the reasons I feared and moved the motions on notice to the end of the meeting. I did not realise it was going to be taking so much time. One is Councillor Davies, 14.6, Policy Review, Prudential Project Management.
Thank you. I'm happy to move in accordance with the officer's recommendation, and I just had a query. On page 226, preparation of prudential reports, it says section 48(4) of the Act provides that this report must be prepared by a person whom the council reasonably believes to be qualified to address the prudential issues as required per legislation. And I just wondered who is qualified to address the prudential issues. I couldn't see, it wasn't clear to me who that would be.
Through Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr Kent.
Through your worship, there's no qualifications prescribed in the Act itself. We use experienced and appropriately suitable consultants, particularly in the field of finance, audit and experience with local government.
So this isn't someone on staff? Could I have a follow-up question? Yes. So this isn't, staff aren't qualified to do this? We have to pay for outside?
Through Madam Mayor, in regards to prudential reports, I would nearly 100% of the time request an external independent person perform them. And in terms of whether they're qualified, generally there's a number of people that have experience in this field, and we seek their bona fides before we engage them. But I do like the arm's length aspect of a prudential report.
That's the reason.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Seconder, please. Councillor Dawes, thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Davey, do you wish to speak again? Right, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. I seek a motion to have a break now. So Councillor Hughes is moving. Second to Councillor Dawes. All those in favour? 10-minute break. Resume at 9:04. 9:04. I'm trying to read it. Prudential. Dawes.
Dawes, thanks.
Isn't she? Isn't she? You heard what I said. I thought it was totally appropriate what I said. Oh, yeah. We've wasted 40 minutes on that.
On many of them, I mean, to be
pathetic. Absolutely pathetic.
Yeah.
All those individual questions should be asked prior to council meeting, not during
that's
the
why
meeting.
we send out the emails to...
I know. And she's had 5 days.
Yeah.
Or 4 days. No, 5.
Rep review comments were so outlined.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, just want to listen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, look, I think I'm going to move in accordance with the officer's recommendation. I thank Mr. Cant and his staff for the work they've done on this, as does the committee of the Old Collegians Rugby Club. Yeah, look, I obviously in support of allocating $350,000 towards the ongoing development of these club rooms that the club has undertaken to do. Look, that actually does represent less than 25% of what this building will be valued at. It is 25% of the costings, but the club is contributing a significant amount of in-kind, well, contributions to this. And I'm very happy, and the club's quite happy about the council undertaking within this motion to assist in seeking external funding, primarily in the first instance through the state government. So while this is something we'd be quite confident with, certainly if that did fall through, we would probably be revisiting the amount that we would be wanting to give. Look, the club will be going ahead with this, as they have undertaken to do throughout. And look, this amount, which, as I've mentioned, is potentially less than they might be entitled to. And I think us granting it at this point is a show of good faith to the club, much like the good faith they've shown the council throughout this process. So this is stage 2, which is really the definition of shovel ready. And I seek your support.
Right, do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones.
Yes, I'm happy to support this. I think it's a good report. I agree with the officer's recommendations. I think the 25% is a good principle. That's what we had for Glenelga Tennis. That's what we had for Burnside Rugby and the Kensington Cricket Club that, I think we unanimously supported 2 fortnights ago. I think we're going to get, the club are going to build a really good facility. I mean, they've got to evaluate. I think it will go on the books at ultimately a lot more than 1.4 million. If we can put 350 in, Mr. Cant seems to think there's a good chance that we'll get funding from the state government. So I agree, let's not put in more money than we have to. If the state government will cough in 350, that's an even better result. I think it'd be a great facility for the community. So I hope you'll support the motion.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Yes, I did press my button.
Councillor Davey?
Oh.
Sorry, I'm supportive of the officer's recommendation and hope that the club can obtain some funding. The one thing I have a concern about is on page 272, the design, the figure 1, it's a very harsh looking building. I was hoping, and I congratulate them because I know they've agreed to not remove any trees, but I thought they were undertaking a really nice low impact building in an environmental sense on that site, and this looks to me to be quite intrusive and not soft and sympathetic to the site. Is there any information on that?
Can I suggest that you go and actually have a look at it? Because it actually does look very good on the site.
Oh, well, I admit I haven't been to visit it, I'm sorry. I've driven past and I didn't notice that it was completed. So it is environmentally sympathetic and with all the trees around it?
Yeah, for me, Madam Mayor, because phase one has been completed, so you can actually get a feel of what the final look of the whole building will feel like on the site. And I must say, I do agree with the Mayor that they've designed the building obviously to work with some of the existing building structure, because they saved a lot of money in their design and build by working with some of the existing structure. But I must admit, I do feel that the execution, this picture is not doing it justice. It's actually not portraying it. I must admit, you'd think it was a different building. It's on its worth going for a quick drive, and you will appreciate that it's a much lighter on the landscape structure than it appears in that building, that picture. Sorry.
Now, Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Mayor. I noticed Councillor Hubel said the 350,000 very quickly, because I have a concern. Risk assessment on page 245 says, Council may also be criticised should it consider committing an amount considered to be excessive by the community and other clubs. The other clubs bit gets me. I think that we have an equity issue in funding for our sporting clubs. I've got concerns for committing this large amount of funding before the finalisation probably of that report, Council Contributions to Community Facilities Policy. I'm wondering why we're not waiting for that before we go for it. The equity issue comes to mind over Glenunga Tennis Club, the Kids and Gardens Reserve, and now this one, whereas they're receiving large grants from the council. Well, will this report be disadvantaging the other sporting clubs who will be applying after the new policy? Will they be disadvantaged? It's hard to know, but I think there's equity issues here, and I think there's a couple of pathetic little things that come to my mind, like squeaky wheels, and the old adage, first in, best dress, springs to mind. So some of these smaller clubs are going to have trouble accessing the money as well. I've got another issue too. Point two, if the council is to make this large commitment to this club financially, what steps and who will take them are there for wider community use, particularly during the summer months? Page 273 vaguely mentions some community functions which have been considered. Nothing startling, nothing concrete. I was wondering if a council officer could be appointed to work with the club to work out some community activities which would be beneficial to the whole community, instead of just bingo. What was the other one? People from Regis going over to visit for morning tea. Come on, there's got to be more things than that. So I was just hoping that this could be considered. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'm fairly certain Mr Cant and his team are on the job on that one, but I'll get Mr Cant to provide me a comment.
Through your worship, we completely agree. We believe that any funding of council facilities, especially using council money, we should have a driver there to activate those facilities as much as possible for all members of the community. We've started the early conversations with the club about seasonal use of the facilities as well, with the hope that we're actually going to be able to provide all year round. Those discussions are very early stage at this moment, but we will certainly be working on that. We've also started discussions about once the facility is finished, we'll be looking at providing it for community access during the day as well. That will be to the club to activate and promote, but we'll be working with them to support.
So will the community be consulted about facilities usage? Would the community consultation?
Through your worship, there'll be no plans at the moment to consult with the community over the potential usage. We're concentrating on finalising the build at this stage. However, if we wish to advertise its availability for community use, that's certainly something we can work with the club on.
Just to add to that, the club has been talking with the Regis community about involving that community, and that community seemed to be very keen, at least that's what I was talking to the Regis people who were there about a month ago, and they were certainly very keen on, and the residents of Regis are very keen on using those facilities for functions and for opportunities for their residents to be able to use those facilities during the day and in the evenings and for social functions, because they don't have anything large enough within their Regis facility to cater for the needs of the growing population within Regis. So I know that there are attempts from that perspective that have been working with the club already, just to inform you of that. Councillor Carbo, next.
Thank you, Worship. I was actually almost going to say the exact same thing as what Councillor Turnbull said. Look, I'm in favour of these things. Okay, I think they're great for the community, and we need to encourage all forms of sporting and physical activity and so forth. So it gets ticks all round from me. But you know, there is that one element of doubt that I have, and that one element of doubt is that we have a lot of clubs and a lot of club rooms in Burnside. And top of my head, I'm thinking of the Glenunga Croquet Club, which is pretty average. And we're giving a whole heap of cash to one club and virtually nothing to everyone else. Well, nothing to a lot of other clubs. So I suppose my question more is to the staff. You know, when I get a phone call from a president from another club, we'll call it Club X, okay, saying, you know, our... bad example. Sorry. When I get a phone call from Club Burnside saying that, you know, we've got salt damp... Do you want to finish tonight? Yeah, I've got salt damp and wood rot and those sorts of things. What do I say? And they, of course, will know about this because it's in the paper and in the TV and so forth. What do I say to those presidents and those committee members who are running sausage sizzles just to, you know, paint the deck? What do we say to those groups where we're giving a lot of cash to one group and tuppence to everybody else?
Through Madam Mayor, I think the answer is you're asking to approach council, but I think it's important to put it in context. This really is a timing issue. We are bringing a policy back to council which will provide a framework which all the clubs of Burnside can then work with to get funding into the future. What we dealt with a couple of weeks ago with the Kenzie Cricket Club and now this one are really projects that were already in the works or on the radar, and we simply didn't have the policy in place at that point in time. So very shortly we'll have a policy, and all those clubs can be referred to that policy position going forward.
Can I ask a subsequent question, Your Worship? Yes. There are some clubs that, this is a very big club with a lot of connections. So for these sorts of things, it's easier for them to apply for grants, apply for corporate sponsorship. But, you know, there are a lot of smaller clubs who just don't have the time and just don't have the connections or the capacity to write grant applications and so forth. So if they were to approach us and say, look, we want to, you know, apply for a federal government grant so we can replace the roof, do we provide them with assistance and support?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, I might just get Mr. Cant to provide me a summary of the support we give.
Through Your Worship, most, if not all of our club leases, we are responsible for the capital upgrades. In a nutshell, the club or the group is responsible for everything inside, operationally. Council is responsible for the capital upgrade. So if a club required the roof replaced, they would approach us and we would work with that within our existing capital programmes. We have assisted other clubs with grant applications in the past, absolutely, and we provide numerous letters of support every year as well for clubs to provide for that as well. But as Chris said, as these buildings are nearing the end of their life and they're no longer suitable for modern standards, we're going to see a lot more of these requests coming to us. And that's why we need the policy that Chris has alluded to. That's why we'd like to bring it in front of you.
Councillor Hughes, you're next.
Well, I was really going to say what the CEO said. You know, I think as a group of people, what we've been presented over the last 2 years, we haven't knocked back any club at all, really. I mean, we've had to negotiate leases and all those kinds of things, but I think if a club has a project that they want to see put forward, then there's nothing stopping them speaking to staff or bringing something to council. And I think to say, oh, we're giving them money, well, we're contributing to an asset that council will actually own ultimately at the end. It's not a gift of money, it's contributing to a project that we will own. So I do support this. I think it's great that staff have considered that we need to look at the policy, because I think, you know, that will at least give us some guidelines around that funding. But I don't think it's giving the clubs money. Essentially what they're doing is giving us an asset, because they are all contributing to that project as well. Thank you.
Councillor Piggott.
A couple of questions, if I could. Can I, firstly, why, given that they are continuing on with phase 2, why aren't we giving them the money now if we choose to give it to them, as opposed to next year's budget?
Sorry, can I just ask for the question to be rephrased? I missed it talking to the Mayor.
I just don't understand. I mean, I understand it's not in this year's budget, but if phase 2 is happening now, I don't understand why, if the council's to give the money to them, as has been proposed, why we don't do it now rather than next year. Is there a reason for that?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, I don't have the budget at the minute. And we thought this was a prudent approach, was to refer it to the budget considerations for next year, so as not to put unnecessary strain on this year's budget.
So what are we doing tonight then? Are we putting it in the list to be considered for next year? That's the way that reads? Is that what we're doing? They better be careful if they spend it too quickly. If that's the case?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And if I may, Madam Mayor, sorry, Councillor Piggott. And in fairness to the club, I've had detailed conversations with the club, and they are comfortable with this level of commitment. They're just seeking an indicative commitment from council, and they understand what referring to the budget means.
But they will have spent it before we get to finally make the decision, it would appear. Yep. Right.
That's correct.
Okay. Right. High Wire Act, that's okay. The, is there any urgency to do the lease in number 4?
I'll refer that to Mr. Cant, Madam Mayor.
Through your worship, urgency, probably not. We are following a process that the club, when they initially approached council and they initially requested some financial support to undertake this redevelopment. At the same time, they suggested that if they were going to invest a significant amount in a council asset, that a longer lease would be appropriate to do so at that time. Council, as part of that decision-making process, resolved to go to consultation on their request at that stage. We did that. We went to consultation. The results of the consultation are provided for you today, and therefore we are recommending in accordance with the results of that recommendation. The current lease expires next year in December, so 2021 in December.
Thank you. And final question before I perhaps speak to it is, would withdrawing number 4 be a valid amendment?
I'll wait for the experts to give an answer, but I think the other thing we need to consider is if they're going to invest this money and spend it before next year without a guaranteed lease, would they be, happy to go ahead and do that?
Without a guarantee of the money, to be fair. There's no guarantee of the money.
What do you reckon? Does it change the motion?
I take your point. I'm interested in the technical answer, which is probably no, I would think. Why leave that in the hands of a rugby club?
Yeah. So rather than sign off for 25 years, so...
There's no way that's an amendment. There's no way that's a valid amendment. I've completely contradicted the original.
Yeah, it's like...
Yeah.
Got that. No, they're up there.
Through Madam Mayor, so if you wish to go through the process to remove that, we're certainly comfortable with that.
As an amendment to this motion, you're comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay, well, if I could do that, and if I could explain why I feel that is something we should do tonight, is that it picks up on Councillor Turnbull and Councillor Cobone's point, I guess, around community usage. What we're doing here tonight is sort of saying, yeah, you'll probably get 350 out of next year's budget. They go ahead and spend 700 to finish off the project, go to the state government and try and get the 350. That's their problem. However, the justification I feel, and I'm not convinced 25% is right, because there's an inequity there too, because if I want to come in and spend $8 million, the 25% gets $2 million out of this chamber. If I'm frugal and only spend 1.4, I only get 350. That's not necessarily a good way forward either, but we'll debate that when the policy comes. But what I think is true is what we are doing is we are buying assets that we eventually own. In truth, the value to them to us as the City of Burnside is really the breadth of their use. How much community use we can kick into that facility. Now, we're getting community use through the old Collegians Rugby Club. That works well. No problem at all. When the lease went out to consultation, and the response we got minimal, but certainly supported that they're happy to see Old Coles stay there for the next 25 years, and so am I. But I do think a lease over the building and over Tregenza Oval shouldn't be to them exclusively for the 12 months, because I think it's almost unfair to expect a rugby club, a volunteer-run rugby club, to actually generate the sort of community use that we would ideally get out of that facility. I think it's something where through the winter they obviously need it most of the time, not all of the time. The Regis deal sounds like a good deal. But I think as a minimum, what we should do is actually not lease it to them for the summer when they don't need it. We should control it for that period, which allows all sorts of things to perhaps be Tregenza Oval, and the facility that we own can be used. So I think as a principle, it was a principle that we pushed through on the Kensington Gardens Reserve when the council generously supported that money. One of the key bits to that was that council controls that building. Yes, you can have it when you need it for cricket. Yes, you can have it when you need it for rugby. But outside of that, we've got control of it, and we will make sure that the community maximises the use of it. And I think that's what we should do as a policy going forward. It's not a policy currently, but I think tonight, I think that should be debated. I'd like to see it come back, and it probably would. I assume in the community facilities policy, it might cover that. I think perhaps we should debate that, whether that's right or not. But tonight, given it's not a compelling thing to do, I feel we should fall in behind the money. I certainly agree with that, but I don't think there's any reason to give the rugby club total control of the facility for 25 years tonight. We may decide down the track that is the right way to go. Personally, I don't think so, but certainly tonight we don't need to do that, and we at least need to defer that to be able to debate it. They can go to phase 2, absolutely solid in the knowledge, I feel, anyway, from the sentiment of council, that they can play rugby out of those premises for 25 years. No problem at all. All I'm saying is when they don't need it for rugby, council controls that building and that facility, and we maximise the community usage out of it. And we get more bang for the buck for the 350k, and possibly 700k if we've got to get them out of the shit, I suspect, without other money. We get more bang for our residents than otherwise a rugby club can deliver. That's my amendment, and I would really like you to support it.
I seek a seconder for that. Is that you, Councillor Davis?
I think that's right. And I think that should be the policy that we go forward. So when we go to, and this has been a bit of we've been quite lucky as a council because we've had a couple of these major processes where we can actually bed down and also understand, I think, better than we ever have before, how we can best secure state and federal funding for those facilities. And I think that we should, as a default position, say that it's 25% of the build cost, and for the rest of the time, it should be community use, as a community use facility. And to my mind, that actually massively improves the position of seeking funding from state and federal governments, especially. So, and I think that if we set that as a default, I think that that will be a successful model for Burnside being better at attracting funding propositions from the state and federal government, which in the past we haven't been as strong on that point. It's something that Campbelltown's done very well, I think. So to my mind, there is no reason to continue with 4. It's not essential tonight that we go forward. But I agree with what Councillor Turnbull was saying in terms of the community uses. How can we be guaranteed? So if we would grant a 25-year lease, that means that they have full control 24 hours a day for the entire year. And what we actually did with the Kensington Gardens Reserve, with the club rooms, and this was a major point of discussion with that club, with those clubs, was to ensure, and we put in point 4, that the facility being available for full community use when not in use by the clubs. So it's not a set in stone type thing, but I think that that's right for us to bring it back, and that would be the policy or the process by which, we as a council, the first lick of these things. In terms of equity between different clubs, I don't buy in to that. I don't think that is a live issue. I think if we set it as 25%, then if you have a club, say the Knitters Club that use a rotunda in Kensington Gardens Reserve, that's their building, that's their facility, they're going to ask for a smaller amount of money. And if they have smaller amounts of members, they ask for smaller facilities. If they have larger amounts of members, multi-use clubs, particularly in close proximity, they're going to ask for more money because they need better facilities. So in many ways, and the reality is that these clubs are doing that kind of triage themselves. So you don't have a 5-member club who are playing chess asking for a $10 million facility. They're just not. And we've never received a proposal like that. I think the proposals we've received are fit for the usages of the clubs which are asking for them, and we haven't actually come up with that problem yet. So I don't think it's valid to say there's some kind of inherent inequity here. I think it's very equitable to say 25%, it's a percentage based on your member usage. So I agree with the amendment. I'm glad that Councillor Pickett brought it up. As soon as Councillor Turnbull mentioned it, it was something that was triggered in my mind, I suppose, to consider this as well. And personally, I will back the 350 in the next year's budget. From my point of view, I will vote for that. And I'm giving my commitment now that I'll support that kind of spending. So, yeah.
You don't wish to speak now? Okay. Councillor Henschke, do you wish to speak on the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, through the Mayor. Tonight I'm really uncomfortable about I feel that I'm really in the dark as to where we're placing, where our investments are going in for clubs and community centres and sporting clubs. It's like, this week it's here, this week it's there. So I'm lost with where our priorities are in this whole city. I know that this is great. We're going to come up with a policy. I'd like to see a portfolio of all these investments so we've got clarity over the priorities and we can go forward confidently saying let's invest here, let's invest there, let's invest $10 here, and wow, that gives us a big bang for our buck. A big bang for our buck. There we go. Thank you, Councillor Jones, and yeah, and that we have condition assessments. Yeah, and that we have clear condition assessments of all of our assets of all these clubs, so we can quite clearly see which ones are the worst ones and you need some influx. Further to that, why are we always funding? I have to say, perhaps I haven't got my facts right here, but it just seems to me a lot of clubs for a lot of boys and men playing, and we do not have in the city of Burnside, as far as I understand, a netball court that was lit at night there where they can play. They have, we have, a number of people drive, residents and ratepayers drive across the city of Burnside in the middle of winter down Greenhill Road through the traffic to reach a netball court to play their sport, and it's killing the kids. Can't get to bed on time because of all of that. Anyway, that's where I'm sitting, and look, it does sound like this motion here is really just saying some assurance and giving them some hope that maybe next year we will, they will have a budget slot there. So why don't we just wait? I'm sure this motion is pretty much saying what I'm saying. Thank you.
Councillor Turnbull, you had a question?
Yes. It might be apparent with the new policy, but at the moment I disagree with Councillor Davis that there is an equity issue. I know of a club that has... Oh, she's spoken. Okay.
Question.
A question. If a club does their own fundraising and renovates their club, are they disadvantaged by the clubs who just go with a handout? That's what I'm saying. And yes, a yes or no answer, but really it's a bit doubtful.
Madam Mayor, I would say that the policy would be designed to acknowledge contributions that the club would make in any funding model.
Okay.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just a question regarding the amendment that we're debating. Can I just make sure that this isn't going to trip up, anything in terms of us removing the lease proposal? Do they currently have a lease? Is it on holding over? Those sort of aspects.
Through Madam Mayor, that's why I got out of my chair earlier, just to ask Mr. Cant, and I'll get Mr. Cant to tell you what he told me earlier.
Through Your Worship, their existing lease expires in December 2021, so we've got a bit of time to resolve this.
Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, I have a question. I may have missed it while Councillor Pickett was asking questions, but a question to administration. This lease over the club rooms, is that separate from the lease over the oval, or is that all together as one? It may have been asked, but I just want to have it clarified.
That's okay. Through Madam Mayor, I'll refer that to Mr. Cant.
Through Your Worship, it's a good question. The answer is consistent with most of our clubs throughout the city of Burnside, in that they have an exclusive lease over the building and an annual licence over the sporting grounds.
Okay, so therefore we're only in 4.1 in the first motion is only about the lease over the club rooms. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jones, you have a question? Can I speak to the amendment? I've spoken to the motion.
No, you don't get to speak to that.
I just have a question.
Right, Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Mayor. I just had a question, noting the previous comments made about opportunities for women and girls. And I couldn't find it in here, but I can remember reading it, that there is provision made in this club's development for a lot more opportunities for women and boys and young girls to be involved. Is that?
Yeah, it was, exactly. The whole girl thing is...
Through Madam Mayor, if I refer that to Mr. Cant.
One answer, thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify that we were making that provision.
Through Your Worship, that's absolutely correct. Part of the rationale of the upgrade and the reason why they secured federal funding several years ago was to provide additional changing rooms and appropriate facilities for multi-use, including male and female.
Thank you. And one final question. Can I just verify that this amendment doesn't disadvantage the club in any way in terms of progressing with the whole project, and then the renewal of their licence and the continuance and flourishing of the club.
Through Madam Mayor, as much knowledge as we have, we believe this will not disadvantage them in terms of delivering this project.
Right, Councillor Piggott, would you like to summarise? Sorry? Oh, no, no summary on the amendment, doesn't speak again. Okay, so now put the amendment. Okay, those in favour? Those against? The amendment was carried. So the amendment becomes a motion, and now, does someone speak again or not? It's been a while since we had one of those lengthy, is it? Yeah. Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I'll take this opportunity to speak for the motion as it stands. I've heard the debate around the... I've heard the debate around the chamber. I do look forward to the policy. It will be a very tricky policy to design. Someone who's sort of played in this space for quite some time, it is very dependent upon the various clubs actually getting their act together, and sometimes that takes 4 years to get a plan together for a facility upgrade that they need. There's consultation through us, and we're only one part of the pie, which I'm very thankful that state and federal government have decided to join us politically motivated. They're joining, I think, as it's a great photographic opportunity for them to be out in the community opening a facility that council will own, and thank golly they are chipping in huge sums of money to go with it. So look, I think it's a really good idea that we actually utilise that and invest in our infrastructure at a reduced rate, and I'm very happy that we've removed the leasing so we can actually look at that in a bit more detail. Because there are some things with the leases and licences, I think, with the new accounting standards as well. So it'll be very good to go ahead and give them this in principle commitment so that they can leverage that to get further funding. So I hope you support it.
Councillor Dawes.
Yes, just like Councillor Cornish, I thought I'd like to give my view. I asked a question before. I know this is back to front. Normally we do the policy first. I'm sure the CEO would agree with that. That's why we're kind of struggling tonight. But I think also the rec and sport policy upgrade is also on the same list. That's also very necessary. I know that Michelle and her team are working with that one. I did appreciate Mr. Kant's comments where he said that there are many club rooms near the end of their life, but don't think it just happens in Burnside. It happens in all councils at the moment, so don't think we are special here. So we're in the same predicament. But I don't mind the 25% because what it does do, it provides an incentive for clubs to find the other 75%. Now, we've Gunlunga Tennis Club, as Councillor Lemon would recall, a lot of work was done by that club, and now they've just started that facility. So clubs that are active, I'm very sympathetic to them. If they are out there trying to find money, whether it's through the state or government or fundraising or sponsorship, I'm very happy to provide some council support. In regards to this particular proposal for old collegians, I've said it before in council, but for me, the use of the facilities, and Councillor Pickett had it right, is very important to me. During summer, the oval isn't used as much as it should be. I know it's used for touch football 1 day a week, so I'm hoping that administration do work with the club and find other uses for that particular oval. It used to have a cricket pitch on it, if I remember rightly, and that was removed. So I think apart from the facility development, I'm also looking for a little bit of direction on the use of the oval as well. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Councillor Lemon, you haven't spoken. Do you wish to? No? I think that's everybody now that has spoken. So I'm going now back to... Do I go back to Councillor? Yes. No, Hubel. No, it became the motion after the amendment was won, okay?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, councillors, for your contributions to this debate. Yeah, this is a very, seems to be a very rapidly evolving space, but I guess one that is, I guess, caused by necessity. Certainly when we were looking at, Glenunga Tennis Club, I remember that very clearly. Look, obviously I missed the debate on the Kensington Gardens joint facility, but these are council assets, and I think we need to remain mindful of that, and I'm very confident that the chamber is mindful of that. Addressing a few things that were brought up in the debate, look, I do want to thank Bell Architects for their drawings in there. I think something that does get lost with artist impressions is that it's not artists, these are actually professional architects, so it's good to see them credited appropriately. But to reassure you, Councillor Davey, the current look of the club rooms at stage 1 certainly is a lot softer than that depiction within the report, so it looks very nice. If I spoke too quickly, I apologise. Look, as far as equity goes, look, I think we'll have a role to play as representatives of the community to support clubs in our areas, prompt them. I remember a year or so ago at least, maybe it was the year before, there was a Community Connections team put together a grant writing workshop that the council provided for clubs, and I know I approached a few clubs within my ward to make them aware that this was happening and that this is a service the council was providing for the clubs. A couple, I think, took it up and a couple didn't, but I think we need to support our clubs to let them know what is available to them. When there are grants available, neighbourhood budget opportunities available, we need to be quite proactive in that space in helping to energise and activate our community through its clubs, because they really are a valuable source in that regard. I think community use of this facility that we're talking about tonight is something that genuinely, I believe, is at the forefront of the Old Collegians' mind. I know it certainly has been part of the conversations they've had with Barry and his team all through this development process. And I can also speak to the close relationship the club has with Regis Centre. They actually have Regis as a sponsor, and I have great confidence that the intentions that both those organisations have moving into a relationship is very solid and genuine. I think the idea of the lease being connected to community use, perhaps council control, is, I guess, a conversation, I think, for another time, but not tonight. But I guess the ad hoc position that we seem to be in at the moment of the 25% certainly supports this motion going ahead tonight. And I did want to also re-emphasise the enormous amount of frugality on behalf of the club in this, which I think speaks to the big gap between the costings of this project and what it would be actually independently valued at. So I would not want to see a club like Old Coles, who is working in very good faith to minimise their costs as much as possible, be disadvantaged because costings don't reflect end value. So I thank you all for the debate, and hope it can be supported.
sorry. Just getting it. Thank you, Mayor. I, Councillor Henschke, give intention to move the following motion, that Council acknowledge... Pardon?
No, you don't need to read it.
No, thank you.
It's all in the...
Yes, so
people's papers are agenda papers at home and it's on the screen.
So,
Just go straight into
yes,
justification.
thank you. This motion on the revised Planning and Design Code community consultation is to acknowledge the work of the City of Burnside and to set out as planned, as stated in this motion, the way we engage going forward with our residents and ratepayers on this very important historic change to development in this state. And I do hereby seek your support.
Councillor Davis?
Yes, I'm happy to support this. This is actually contained already on page 206 of our agenda at 29 in many ways, talking about how we're promoting this. So I think this is something that we're looking at anyway, and I think this is a good reframe from Councillor Henschke to further emphasise that point.
Councillor Lemon?
Yes, I also would say to members, go to page 206 and have a look at paragraph 29 and 30, where our CEO has already undertaken to do exactly what this motion seeks to achieve. But given that this is planning, I don't believe you can have too much of a good thing, so I'm happy to support it.
More of a question, if I can, Your Worship. There's one thing I don't understand about all this, and just in Burnside, we've got 2 ministers, a deputy premier and a premier. Our residents are their residents. When we talk to them, and of course we would talk to them all the time about a lot of matters, but when we talk to them about this, aren't they getting the same phone calls and the same emails that we're getting about infill and loss of character and loss of trees and so forth? I don't understand where this disconnection is taking place and how we're not on the same page, we're not on the same path. So when you speak to them, what do they say about this?
Madam Mayor, did you want to make any comment on that?
I'll just make a comment that the letter that we, I think there were 12, 15 mayors sent a letter, was basically, according to the report in the paper, the Minister of Planning said it's not relevant at this time, not important, not important. So whether that's a fair report on the Minister or not, I don't know, but we were all very particularly concerned about that letter that we specifically focused on the problem in relation to trees and state planning development. So that's one. We haven't had a meeting with the Minister, with Vicky Chapman, since she became the Minister.
Yeah.
Have we?
Yeah, if I may, Madam Mayor. So I've had a number of conversations with most of the ministers and Vicky Chapman. They always give us a sympathetic ear.
Yes.
But the only thing I can surmise is obviously they're having to process all the competing issues they're going to have to deal with to make their decision. I'm sure our residents are having the same conversations that we're having. Yes. So I am, to my mind, they are hearing a consistent message, and I, that's all we can do at this point in time, and leave the decision in their hands. It's a question that we don't know the answer to, but as you know, once it gets within Parliament, there are competing considerations that they have to take into account, and that's why they won't be giving us a definitive position, because they're reserving their right till they consider their competing priorities.
I can add that talking with Matt Pinniger last week, he did indicate that Vicky Chapman was giving them a very good ear and really listening to the issues that the LGA have been putting forward, which are representative of our ideas as well. And I think the other thing is that, I've filled out a card that was handed out the Historical Society to respond, and I got a very good letter back from Vicky saying that yes, we're taking on board all of the issues, we are considering changes, we are looking to make improvements on the existing project. The other thing is that the Community Alliance is actually having a meeting, an AGM in our community centre on Thursday the 5th of November, at which Vicky Chapman is going to be speaking. Sorry. So I'm just passing that information on. So, the question was asked, I think we've answered it. So, is anyone who wishes to speak? Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I just want to commend Councillor Henschke for her motion and thank her for it, and just hope that by raising it again and keeping it right up front and centre, we can make some sort of impact. So I'm happy to support it.
Councillor Henschke, do you wish to speak again? Otherwise, I'll put the motion.
Just briefly to thank the elected members and also the administration, completely supporting all the residents' ratepayers on this mission. Thank you.
Right, those in favour? Carried. Formal recognition of trees as assets. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just read a slightly amended version. I'll just receive, it is just slight change of emphasis. So the motion is that Council receive a report for consideration by the end of January 2021, which investigates the development of an asset management plan for trees, and 2, that the report also investigates the capacity and implications of the City of Burnside declaring trees as an asset class, providing a service in line with the Local Government Act, applicable accounting and financial standards and existing City of Burnside asset classes, taking into account the following matters: the tree evaluations formula, asset management principles, practices and systems, risk management, life cycle plan management, asset condition, plans for renewal and enhancement, and monitoring and review. So I've raised this motion tonight because we're all aware of the value of our community, that our community places on our trees and our canopy cover in Burnside, for all the reasons that we know of, for their beauty, their habitat, especially their environmental values, and also plus the market value they add to our properties. Currently, we give undertakings to manage our existing trees, the old and the new ones, the whole range across our parks and streets, with a range of plans and strategies. However, there's no actual asset management plan for trees in place, as there is for buildings, roads, stormwater infrastructure, and one for open space, which mentions trees in passing. So it's difficult to quantify in our budget lines how much Burnside invests in preserving, maintaining, risk managing our trees, so that we can demonstrate this and so that it all appears in our long-term financial plans, our business plans, our budget and financial statements. Traditionally, trees have been managed incidentally in all of these areas. In our development of our business plans and budgets recently, I've asked the question often, why aren't trees included as assets? And I've never got an answer. So I pursued this with, I was actually told we had to move a motion through Garrick and get action that way. When I spoke to the policy people in the Local Government Association, they said there was actually no reason why each council cannot identify, they have the power to identify and manage their own asset classes. So this emanates from section, I forget which section of the Act, and it's Local Government Act, Chapter 8, which gives us the power to determine under our strategic management plans that we have the capacity to develop our own asset classes. And they provided a test for the development of an asset class, or for the determination of one. It's, does the asset, which is already in existence, provide a service? And trees certainly do for our environmental, climate change, mitigation and beauty for suburbs, etc. in Burnside. The second test is, does council maintain assets to provide this service and allocate funds? Yes, it allocates significant resources to maintain and improve our trees and tree canopy. And what is the use of the asset? Well, this is fairly obvious to all. Our trees are a huge asset. So it's on that basis that I've moved that I think we need to go down the path, or we have an opportunity to go down the path, that our trees are recognised by us all as highly valued assets in their own right, and that they are identified and managed formally as such. So that's the intent of my motion tonight, that we consider this and that the administration bring us back a report. I think it's also timely with our declaration that climate change presents such a significant risk to both the quality of life of residents within Burnside and also our natural and built environment. And we've also got our new strategic plan, Burnside 2030, where we can now move to consider trees as primary assets and then incorporate this asset class into our financial statements and accounting plans as we invest in them. I'm not an accountant. I know there are specific accounting standards and norms and orthodoxies, and that's what I'd like to see us explore. So that's what I'm asking for your support, that we ask the administration to assess this and bring a report back to us to enable us to see if we can raise the prominence of trees and coherently manage, which we're already doing, I know, but so that it actually is in all our financial statements and business plans, and hope you'll support it.
Councillor Davis, do you wish to second it?
Yes, thank you. I know that the report that comes back won't recommend including trees as an asset line in our financial statements. But I'm seconding this because I think what will come back in that report is essentially what Councillor Davey is hoping to achieve. And to my mind, when we talk about climate change or we talk about the value of our streetscapes, it's very easy to say, well, this is the, like I suppose, like an emotional framework of what it is. Well, we're supporting bird life where it gives us quality of life, so it gives us clean air. But what we don't do, and for people such as myself who have a more numbers and figures type of mind, we don't actually put a dollar value on the value that our trees provide us as a community. More importantly, I feel, or I'm not aware of, the notion that we would actually track the total number of our street trees in a financial type manner where we can say, all right, in 2020, we had $100 million worth of street trees, and in 2021, that increased to 105 million. I couldn't tell you how much it would be. But I suppose that to me is a very, very valuable thing to understand, because when we go out for our budgets and we look at spending on it, spending on our maintenance of our trees, and our emphasis on it, we essentially saying to our residents that in the city of Burnside, you are living within an asset, and we could treat them as an asset of X dollars, and that is essentially an amenity asset to you. So it wouldn't go into our financials because they're not depreciating assets. They appreciate over time, then they die. And so they're not an asset which could really form part of our financial statements. But I would encourage you to vote for this anyway, because I think what will come back in the report from the administration is looking at dealing with trees as an asset and potentially explaining their value to the community in a more financial terminology. Furthermore, instead of saying, we planted 2,000 more trees, or we did, X things, which to my mind is something which is very, very difficult to quantify. If we could say, well, Burnside has a value of $50 million worth of trees or $100 million of trees, whatever that number is, and year on year and year that asset is increasing, or we're projecting it to be stable or projecting it to decline. And I think that would be a useful tool for our community to understand what kind of value that trees play within our community. Now, I know we have this tree valuation formula. When we look at one, we assess its size and its type and the value that it provides to the community. And I imagine that, in my street, there's a whole bunch of new trees that have just been planted. So now, once those trees have been planted, you'd essentially estimate or apply that formula over time and be rather, Excel spreadsheet type of analysis to determine, what the value or growth of our tree canopy would be. We actually have a lot of these different, there's heaps of policies, there's heaps of reports around trees, but I as an individual find it difficult to explain in simple terms what is their value and is it going up or down. So with our tree canopy or other things that we're implementing now, the increased number of trees that we plant on our verges, how is that affecting our kind of bottom line? And to my mind, this would help us to explain to our residents what the City of Burnside Council is doing in a concise way, in a monetary way that everybody understands. Our value is going up or it's going down, and it's something that we can understand and chart. And I think that this simplifies a very complex problem. So that's why I'm going to be supporting this motion, despite some of the reservations that I have about it. But I think that the report that comes back to Council will achieve that aim, and I think that it will give us the tools to better communicate with our residents and explain the importance of trees.
Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions. My first question is the end of January too soon to produce this report?
Through Madam Mayor, I'd like to thank Councillor Davey for working with me on the time frame for this one. We had a conversation and I believe I can meet that deadline.
Excellent. And my second question is, if we're going to value the trees and make them an asset as part of our asset class, would that have implications, and this is really actually quite important to me, would that have implications on how we would respond to tree damaging activity that has taken place over the last few years in this place? So if we've got an asset that's valued at $100,000, where some random member of the public has actually thrown copper nails into the bottom of it, is it that this tree will have that value that we could then insist on criminal activity? Is there a repercussion there? That's, I guess, what I'm asking.
I can't give you a definitive, because some of it relates to the enforcement piece of legislation that are currently deficient. But I think it does enable us to mount a stronger legal case should we have the opportunity to mount one. So I think it could be advantageous to us.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, that was exactly the same question I had, and I will expand further in that these cases are really difficult to prove. We already have examples of damage, and whether we have insurance cover for trees. How does that affect our insurance policy? Could it have implications?
Through Madam Mayor, I don't believe we'll have any impact on our insurances. So we're insured under a mutual scheme. But I think the key with the enforcement action is we actually need some changes to be made to the enforcement legislation. There's currently too many vagaries with it. to enable, substantive enforcement. But we're working on that piece. But I still think this is a valuable project to pursue to achieve, I think, the desired outcomes of Councillor Davey.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure about this motion. I've been thinking about it all weekend. And because everyone knows my view on trees and how we need to do everything we possibly can to increase our canopy. People move into Burnside because of trees. It is our brand, it is our image, and we need to do everything we can to protect it. But the one thing that sort of worries me about this sort of motion is it seems to me it's a bit of fluff. We need ideas that are going to have a bit of meat on the bone. We need ideas that are really going to turn the tide because, okay, we're doing well in our parks and gardens and our streets, but I do worry about the war we are losing across the whole council, especially on private land. And I'm really starting to get sick of seeing all these trees being cut down, and we all hate it, and residents, neighbours of that property, they ring me, and I'm sure they ring you. And it's got to stop. We need something big, we need something bold. And simply putting financials on a tree, okay, it might look might make the paperwork look better, but is it really going to have any real action? Is this really going to boost the number of trees that we have? Is this really going to boost our canopy? Is this really going to stop people cutting down significant trees in their backyards? Is it really going to do it? Or is this just another report that's going to make us look good and we can talk about how we have $100 million worth of trees in our city, but that's it? It looks, to me, it's pretty hollow, it's pretty weak, and I don't know how I'm going to vote for it, but I just wish people would come, bring motions on notice to this chamber that we're really going to kick butt in stopping the war that we are losing when it comes to our canopy.
Councillor Dawes.
Just two questions of administration. I can just recall that in the past somebody has given a value to a tree, a dollar value. And I'm thinking 5 to 10 years ago, there was a big tree in Burnside, it was worth $140,000 or something like that. Am I dreaming that, or has that happened in the past?
Through Madam Mayor, Mr. Kent may know the response to that.
Through your worship, there's a valuation method listed within the urban tree strategy.
Okay. So therefore we don't need to reinvent things, is that on valuing trees?
Yeah.
Is there in the motion that
Sorry, through Madam Mayor. Yes, I don't believe we're going to reinvent the wheel in terms of evaluation methodology, but we'll review that to make sure we're happy with it. But from my reading of this motion, it's asking me to explore the recognition within our financial statements and trying to attribute a value.
I understand that.
Place in the financial statements.
Yeah, I'm thinking that some of the work's already been done here to help you, so we're not starting from scratch. That's the first thing I'd make.
I agree.
Right, the second point I'm making is that I think Dr. Phil had a canopy coverage through a heat map or something like that, and we, the 30% figure. Now, how does that relate to the value of trees? How would you do a report that covers both areas? You don't know?
No, in all honesty, once I get this resolution gets up, then I'll go away and work out how to formulate the report.
Okay.
I understand the intent.
Yeah.
So I'll go back from there.
Yeah, I think every member of this council is a tree lover. I mean, there's no question of that. The thing here, we're only talking about street trees, and already I forget who it was, another councillor mentioned that, you know, whenever we have infill, everything gets knocked down. There might be one tree on the boundary, and that's all that's left. But only, this motion, only, this question only refers to our trees, council trees. Is that how you interpret it?
Yes, through Madam Mayor, because I can only look after trees under our care and control.
Right. So therefore, when we do a canopy coverage of this particular council area, and we're 30, is it 35%? I think the figure now, whatever it is, that also includes private trees.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Thank you very much. Just, I'll come back and make some more comments.
Thank you, Worship. I think Councillor Jones also has his hand up. If you can add him to the queue, that would be appreciated. I've got to admit, I was like some of you. I sort of looked at this and like, can't actually happen. And then started thinking about it a bit more and doing a bit of research. I certainly like the idea. We've got the formula. It's in our strategy. It's been in our strategy for almost 10 years. I think it's a really good way of valuing a tree. We've got an amazing online portal, trees.burnside.sa.gov.au, where you can click on every single individual tree on a map, and it will come up with the size of it, a picture of it, how much oxygen it consumes a year, how much, or carbon dioxide I should say, how much oxygen it produces in a year. It is a fantastic, you know, award-winning, I must admit. I did represent council and picked up the award for this one, so I do know a bit about it. But it's amazing, and how great it would be to actually have the value of that tree on that register, so that, and this is where I'm going to contradict Councillor Carbone, but if I'm a local resident and I see a street tree that, you know, a council website says they're valuing that at $50,000, I've got one bigger than that on my property. You know, more than $50,000, ringer, yeah. It puts a value to the private landowner of the value of a tree, and I think that's extraordinarily important. Trees do get valued in accounting standards. I have gone through some of them. Obviously, it's agriculture, forestry is the major one. They haven't really gone on the environmental sort of benefits of it. Fruit trees are another one that can get valued because there's produce that comes from it. There's an agricultural accounting standard. But the UN at the moment is trying to come up with an internationally agreed economic value for environmental assets, and that's internationally. So I think, you know, we're sort of on the verge of getting there. I am concerned about what havoc the depreciation or appreciation of these assets will have on our operational budgets. But I won't even touch that, and hopefully the report doesn't go into that in too much detail. But I certainly think looking at that and City of Burnside being progressive in the environmental space, this is something that we should get behind. It will have value for the community as a whole. So initially when I first read it, I wasn't very supportive, but when I've done a lot more research, I am fully behind this report, so I will be supporting the motion as it stands.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Henschke, a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we reframe all of this, accounting stuff? I mean, it's lovely, but into the United Nations Sustainability Goals, and I can see it all mapping onto sustainable cities and communities, Goal 11, and then the wellbeing one as well. So pitching it up in that respect, is that possible in our communications?
I think it's very worthwhile, but I would see once we've got the report and all the information that we could probably
That needs
adopt
to be in a summary at the end rather than a response to the question now. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make is that there's a lot of information out there already. You're not starting from scratch, and I said that before, and the urban something policy that you mentioned by Barry there. So, I believe it'd be interesting to see what they come up with. And Councillor Davis might be right that some things may not come out as how we would like, but yeah, an accounting way of looking at trees. Yeah, that's interesting. I'd be interested to see what the administration come back with. I'll be in support.
It would be a very new initiative because no other council, I believe, in South Australia does value their trees. Councillor Hubel.
I'd follow that up, Your Worship, with the phrase yet. I think this is a very innovative way to go, even though talk about this has been around for a long time. Look, I think we can control what we can control, and that is our trees. And I think having an asset management plan that includes these resources for the community is a very good thing. But yes, Councillor Carbone, getting people to stop cutting down their trees is also something we really need to be putting our time into as well. So this is good. It's not the full picture at all.
Right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Right, Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I won't take any more time. I thank you all for your very valuable contributions and the range of them. I think this is a very exciting way to move and possibly very innovative, and I think we can use this. The report will be very interesting, and we can use that as in whatever way we wish then to add to or sell our trees, but as well to explain to our community what we're doing and how we're tying together all the work we actually do on trees and then the investment we make in them every year and how we can increasingly do that. So hopefully you'll support this. Thank you.
Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay. Seconded by Councillor Davey. All in favour? And sorry, did you say the time?
It has to be 30 minutes.
Has to be 30 minutes, right till 11 o'clock. Okay. Right, Councillor Piggott. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I'll get the vote again. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It did fail. Right, so... Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, the motion is lost.
Let's go. All right. Look, we have a 6-minute opportunity here, I think. You've read the motion. What I'm after is a report from the CEO that actually gives us a methodology over the next 3 years. We've done 2 of our council. We've got 2 more. What this would do if we had a methodology that actually had a sustained and methodical, actually, look at our budgets in terms of saving money going forward. We've always put pressure, and they've delivered on our administration to make savings each year, but it's an ad hoc type thing, and it doesn't necessarily deliver you savings that can happen year in, year out after that. So what I'm after is a report from the CEO. He's been here a year now. He should know. He should be able to give us something to work with. We may choose not to do it, but it's a report as to how we could do it if we did go with him. So I seek your support.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, agreed.
Does anyone wish to speak?
I'll speak against it. I disagree with this fundamentally. As a past public servant, we were always under constraints to actually cut budgets to departments, 3% this year, then 3% the next year, and the only way you can do that for the long term is lose staff. That was my experience. You lose staff. I'm not prepared to do that, so I won't support this, although it is only a report.
Councillor Dawes.
Yes, I'm the same as Councillor Lemon here. At this time, I don't think it's the right time. We've just had a pandemic. It's still happening. I don't know how we can look at the next 3 years, a sustainable savings over the next 3 years. I'd like to consider this motion next year when we have a better understanding of what's happening in the world, rather than saying, yeah, this is a good idea now, let's do it. I feel there's too many imponderables out there. So I'd like it to be deferred for a period of time next year.
Councillor Carbone.
I'll be short. Policies around zero rate increases, I find them cheap and tacky. You move them when you've got nothing else to move. I think we should change our mindset towards delivering greater value. We can always reduce rates by cutting the guts out of the budget. I think we should focus on what we can do to deliver more value. Residents are happy to pay any amount of money for their rates, as long as there's a perceived value attached to it.
Councillor Henschke.
Yeah, I'm concerned about our investment in our assets, and our ratios have been down lately, and I think this is going to threaten that further.
Councillor Hughes.
I will support this because at the end of the day, it's a report, and I would be interested in seeing the outcome. And then at the end, and then once we've seen what's in that report, we can make a decision as to whether we support that. I think it could actually provide our residents with more value, because the CEO may go, oh look, we provide all these services that perhaps are unnecessary, or we could get a better deal in terms of procurement, we could package this up, do this. These are the things that I'd like to see, and I think it gives us, you know, a better long-term vision that just year by year, hoping that staff can find savings. And it may well be that report comes back and he says, I can't find any savings. So I'm happy to support it based on the fact it is a report. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? All right, Councillor Pickett.
Is next year we've only got a year before re-election. If there's any hard decisions to be taken, which there might be depending on what he has, and we might like to do it, it's very hard in the last year of a 4-year election term. We need to do it now. Let's get the report. If you don't want to do it, knock it on the head in January. Vote for it.
Those in favour? Those against? Carried.
Your Worship, while I've still got 30 seconds, I'd also like to congratulate the IT team for their triple award. That was well deserved, so